across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It is coming up to 3 minutes past 6, and of course it is Tuesday morning. It is the 18th of February. We are going headlong all for it this week. We're all guns blazing, and there's an awful lot to talk about. There's some amazing stories this morning. For example, if I told you that the prisons crisis was caused by too many criminals being sent to jail, you'd go, you think? What do you think the prisons are actually for? Are the prisons for locking people up and keeping them off the streets? Yes. Are prisons there to supposedly rehabilitate people? Well, maybe, but not quite as important as locking them up. Are prisons there so that people shouldn't go to them? Well, that's what David Gauke seems to think. He's the guy that was given the job of reviewing the current state of our prisons, and he's now talking in his published review of what has gone wrong. And what he says has gone wrong is that the tough-on-crime politicians have made a complete and utter horlicks of what the prisons are now for. We're going to be talking about that. Peter Bleksley's here with me, former Metropolitan Police detective who knows a thing or two about villains and a thing or two about prisons. Very good morning to you, Peter.
And a thing or two about locking them up.
And a thing or two about locking them up. I can't believe that after months and months and months of scrutiny, this is what they've come up with. But, you know, this is Britain, and we are basically on our back legs. Nobody knows what's going on. 38,000 paedophile crimes a year, by the way, apparently are now happening, and those are just the ones we know about. We're going to talk about Lord Hermer and his latest Chagos Islands betrayal. But before we do any of that, of course, we're going to talk about the latest from the Sun. Yesterday we told you about £15 billion of public money going south to all sorts of ridiculous schemes in places like Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, you know, millions and millions of pounds going to the Congo. We've now got more than £8 billion of public cash set aside for research into things like queer animals and pro-trans robots. There's another Harry Cole exclusive. We'll be talking to Harry later on in the show. It's unbelievable how much money is actually going south. We're going to be talking about the Great British Railways watchdog, which is not really doing what it's supposed to say on the tin. Also, Keir Starmer yesterday goes over to Paris and decides to tell everybody how he plans to solve the problems in Ukraine. Unfortunately for Sir Keir, the Germans have already said he's highly inappropriate, his ideas are completely useless, and they don't want to adopt them at all. So well done, Keir. Thank you very much indeed for playing, but I'm afraid you won't be making it onto the next section of the show. He's also been pictured rather bizarrely holding hands with Emmanuel Macron. Now, call me old-fashioned, he might as well have kissed him on the lips. I don't know why he's holding hands with Emmanuel Macron. Maybe you can explain it for me. 0344 499 1000. Kemi Badenoch's got a big interview in the Daily Mail as well, talking about the poison of wokery. I think she's trying to be J.D. Vance. I don't know whether we just call her J.D. Badenoch to see whether or not she's actually going to get anywhere with this. Also, 3/4 of old age pensioners, according to Daily Express, living in cold homes. We know that's true because we know that they've had their heating allowance cut by this ghastly, awful, penny-pinching Labour government. Oh, and by the way, Rachel Reeves is in trouble again. Apparently she's made even more stuff up on her latest CV. We'll tell you all about that as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number. If you've forgotten how to get in touch, here's how you do it.
Hi, Mike. It's Andy calling from Bristol. Great show as usual.
Good morning, Mike. It's Nigel here in London.
Good morning. It's Judy from Altofts, West Yorkshire.
Good morning, Mike. Dave here.
Hello, Mike. This is Liz calling from Qatar. I love your show.
Hi, Mike. This is Jonathan here.
Morning, Mike. Anna, sorry. Mike, you have no idea how angry I am.
I have no idea how angry you are, but I've got a bit of an idea. We've got much more to do all the way through the day today. 6 minutes past 6. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Welcome to Tuesday morning, and if you are waking up, it is half term, so you're probably not going to worry about getting the kids out to school, but nevertheless, we've plenty of things to talk about. Very good morning to Peter Bleksley. Good to see you, Peter.
Governor.
I think we should set the stall out here, right? We've got a new video that we want to play for everybody. It's from the United States of America, from a woman called Kristi Noem, who is the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. They've decided they've had enough of illegal migration, so they've put this video out. Check it out.
I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security.
Thank you, President Donald J. Trump, for securing our border and putting America first. If you try to enter illegally, you will be caught. You will be removed, and you will never return. Follow the law, and you'll find opportunity. If you break it, you'll find consequences. Strong borders mean a stronger America. President Trump is making America safe again.
I mean, it's not difficult, this stuff, is it? That's exactly what we should have, a message like that to all these wallies that are coming in on a daily basis into the streets of Dover.
Imagine a UK politician standing in front of a row of the Union flags with that stirring music and that clear, unequivocal message to anybody who's considering entering the UK illegally. Wouldn't you go, that's the kind of politician I want? Well, you know, that's the messaging I want sent.
But if we did it right, we'd have a completely different kind of music. It would be much calmer because somebody would say, it's a bit aggressive, you know, that music. So let's play little music, softer music. And what you say is, if you come to this country illegally, you will be removed. Unless, of course, your son doesn't like the chicken nuggets that they make in his home country, or in case, you know, despite the fact that you might be a paedophile, your children will miss you. Or the latest one, a Slovakian man, if you made a shovel attack on a woman, hit a woman with a shovel, you won't have to be sent back because you've been rehabilitated. Can you imagine the British version of that? It would be ridiculous, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so even if we did have a politician that wanted to make an advert, a film like that, our system wouldn't support that politician in what they say.
They'd have a guy with a sort of, you know, barrister's wig and a gown on, popping in, going, excuse me, I'm a human rights lawyer, and I'm afraid you can't be doing any of that. You know, the Americans don't care about human rights when you're breaking the law, which is where we should be. If you break the law, your human rights go out the window.
Because, of course, America is not in Europe, and therefore is not bound by the European Court on Human Rights.
No, it's really not. And it is pathetic, isn't it, that we've come to this point where we can't get rid of people who come to this country, despite the fact that they could be murderers, terrorists, scumbags, you know, armed robbers. I mean, just ridiculous. I walked past the scene yesterday on Borough High Street, and if I was a copper, as you were, a very successful one, you could, you know, I mean, you can tell there's something not quite right about a scene. There was a brand new orange and black Land Rover Defender, right? There were two guys standing next to it. One was leaning on it, smoking a cigarette. The other one was on the phone. They were clearly talking in Albanian. These are clearly two drug dealers who have got literally a brand new car worth about 75,000 quid. Now, if I was a police officer, I'd lift them straight away. I'd just go, right, you two, you come with us.
Illegally parked, was it, perchance?
It was.
There you go. So there's your in.
There's your in.
As a police officer, right?
Parked on there's a double red line there, so it's no stopping.
An absolute gift.
Right.
So you start with that. This vehicle is parked illegally. Excuse me, sir, I'll have the keys. So they're not going to drive it off, right? Stick them in your pocket. Right. And then the next thing, of course, is you want to establish ownership of that vehicle. Perfectly legitimately.
Where is it registered?
So exactly. So you ask who the owner is. Can he prove who he is? Is he the owner? Has he borrowed it?
Has he got any identification?
And of course, nowadays, you can check on the police computer systems as to whether it's insured. Not only who it's registered to, a tool that we didn't have back in my day. And then all of a sudden, depending on the answers, the attitude, you might find that you've got reasonable cause to search that vehicle and search the person who's driving it and search the passenger, quite possibly. So all from a simple traffic offence, it potentially opens up a raft of other inquiries that you can make, all perfectly lawful, with justification, and see where all of that goes.
And then, again, all of it coming from simply an observation that you make as a man that knows a thing or two about the bad uns and the wrong uns and all of that, and you go, don't like the look of you guys, we'll check you out. But that's not what's going on anymore.
If it looks wrong and it smells wrong, in all likelihood, it probably is wrong.
I mean, I've been around the block a few times. I think I can spot the old Albanian drug dealer. You know, and I'm afraid that that's what they look like. And if I got it wrong, my apologies to many Albanians who are probably in this country with brand new Land Rover Defenders, not looking dodgy at all. And I'm sure that you're doing a very, very nice job contributing to the economy. But in this particular case, I don't think they were.
Yes, well, if they were titans of British industry, employing thousands, paying millions
you never
in tax.
know, do you? You never know.
Then we're eternally grateful to them. Just the kind of migration we want.
Exactly right.
But if they happen to be lying, cheating, stealing, thieving, robbing, murdering drug dealers, then we'd like to see them elsewhere.
We seem to be occupying a disproportionate number of places in our prison system simply because of their associations, shall we say.
As proven by recent statistics.
Yes, we'll come back to the prison system. Let's have a quick look at old Keir Starmer, the farmer harmer, whatever he is. This is him yesterday going over to Paris to talk about sending troops to Ukraine.
We must continue to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position, whatever happens next, and to make sure that if there is peace, and we all want peace, that it is lasting. This isn't just about the front line in Ukraine, it's the front line of Europe and of the United Kingdom. It's about our national security, and I think that we need to do more. We need to step up in terms of our collective response in Europe. And by that I mean capability, by that I mean playing our full part when it comes to the defence of the sovereignty of Ukraine if there's a peace agreement, and of course when it comes to funding and training.
Why is he doing an interview in front of an MRI machine?
Perhaps they were going to shove him through it to see if they could find a brain.
Here's Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, on Keir Starmer's interaction. He goes, suggestions made by Keir Starmer were completely premature, highly inappropriate, and he said he was very irritated by Keir Starmer. Well, join the club, mate. We all are very irritated by Keir Starmer.
Yeah, try living in Britain,
Yeah,
Scholz.
I know. Absolutely hopeless. You know, Starmer suddenly, as I said this yesterday, seems to think of himself as some kind of a cross between Theodore Roosevelt and Winston Churchill, that he's going to go across to Ukraine and solve all their problems, whereas Trump is having the real meetings over in Saudi Arabia with Sergei Lavrov, who's a ghastly individual, who's the Russian foreign minister, and old Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State.
Now, forgive me for pointing out the obvious. The war in Ukraine is ghastly and dreadful, and I'm sure it would be great if it could be brought to a halt. But you know what? Donald Trump is rendering all these European leaders as utterly irrelevant.
Irrelevant and useless, yeah. You don't need it. What are they for?
He's sidestepping everybody on the global political scale. He's outmanoeuvring everyone. They can't second-guess what he's going to do next. And look at what he has done.
And they can't get into the room where where all the interesting stuff is happening.
Where was Starmer and Scholz and all those other European leaders who were having a huge whinge last week? Where were they in terms of getting the conversation about Ukraine to this point? Were we talking about
they just kept, well, Starmer just wanted to keep giving them money. You know, $3 billion a year he's pledged.
Yeah, but were those politicians and were we talking about peace talks for Ukraine and Russia 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago? No, there was no talk of it. Donald Trump comes into power, starts picking up the phone, shakes up the whole shebang, points out the irrelevance and the weakness and the non-existent kind of political nous of all these European leaders, and suddenly people are being brought to tables. The idea of ceasefires or peace is being discussed, and that has to be a good thing.
Of course it is. Absolutely right. And all these mealy-mouthed types who have been talking, some of them were on my show yesterday, Sir Gerald Howarth, who was a former defence minister, saying, you know, Trump's naive, he's getting it wrong, you know, he shouldn't be talking to Putin. I'm like, well, what do you want to do? Just have a war forever? And
exactly.
And then they say things like, oh, well, we should defeat Russia. Well, that's not going to happen. So clearly, after 3 years, it's a stalemate. Nobody's going to beat Russia, so you have to go to the peace table and sort it out. Simple.
Defeat Russia. The temerity of these cowardly politicians, and it goes back as far as Johnson when the war broke out and all that kind of game. And I've never ducked from saying what I said then and what I say now. If on the day that Russia invaded Ukraine, somebody, say for example Boris Johnson or another leader of a NATO country, had stuck a piece of paper under Zelensky's nose and said, right, sign there, you're now in NATO, deploy troops, we could have bashed Russia's troops back to Moscow with their backside spanked within a matter of weeks, and it would have sent out a very powerful message. But of course, none of these lily-livered clowns wanted to do that.
No, and neither did Biden, by the way.
No, exactly.
He was in at the time.
Lily-livered, weak, pathetic politicians. So that's why it's got to where it is.
Exactly.
Now, of course, we've got Trump, who is clearly not a weak politician. He brings people to the table.
Yeah. Weakness is never a good thing in any way, shape or form. Let's have another look at Starmer. We'll give him another chance. He's committed to placing British forces in Ukraine. Have a look at this.
Europe must play its role. And I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground alongside others if there is a lasting peace agreement. But there must be a US backstop, because a US security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again.
Why does he need notes, by the way? He's making a very short speech after having had a meeting, which presumably he was able to contribute to, able to remember, able to kind of form an opinion over. Why does he need to read from what looked like some very scrambled, sort of screwed up looking bits of paper?
Because he is a plastic manufactured politician.
Yeah.
He's been in meetings all day long.
Yeah.
He knows what the result of those discussions are.
Right.
He should be able to walk out of there, do a piece straight to camera and tell them what he thinks and what's going to happen.
Right.
But no, he has to rely on something scribbled on A4.
I know.
It looks dreadful.
He does look hopeless, doesn't he?
He's not a commitment politician.
Also, can you imagine anyone in the White House paying any attention to anything that he just said there?
No, he's an irrelevancy.
They don't
He's
care.
flying over to meet Donald Trump next week or the week after.
Yeah.
He's going to really...
Well, Trump's already said, you know, when he was asked about it over the weekend, we played the clip yesterday, what are you going to talk about? He said, I don't know. He asked for the meeting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He's a nice guy. You know, we've had a couple of meetings, but Trump doesn't care about him. He is completely irrelevant. He has made Britain irrelevant on the world stage, and he's, frankly, an embarrassment.
Yeah,
It's an embarrassment.
absolutely.
I wish he'd stop travelling and representing my country, because if that's what people think is the best of my country, they're going to just go, well, Britain's finished, isn't it?
Without an auto cue or a piece of paper, he's absolutely finished, isn't he? He cannot speak spontaneously, truthfully, what he feels, what he thinks, because he's manufactured, he's being manipulated and manoeuvred clearly by aides, advisors, all that kind of nonsense. Somebody's shoved that piece of paper in his hand and God read from that.
I know.
And it looks abysmal. Why don't we have...
It's like curling up at the sides. I mean, it's just embarrassing. Just give it up, Starmer, for God's sake. Don't worry, though. We've got Rachel Reeves to come. We're going to be telling you about her. There's a very good piece in the Telegraph online at the moment about why she should be out of a job, written by me, funnily enough. I would urge you to go and read it. It's on my Twitter as well. Rachel Reeves has been found out to have made yet another claim which is untrue on her CV. I mean, how much longer have we got to put up with this absolute and utter crap? It's 6:20. I'm Mike Graham. Peter Blexley's here. We'll be back after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 23 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory at the home of common sense. Peter Blexley's here, full of common sense, as you might expect. Let's talk, Peter, shall we, about the front page of The Sun, which is day 2 of Harry Cole's expose of all the sort of ridiculous amounts of money that are handed out for various different projects around the world. These are more at home today. Yesterday we had £15 billion worth of stuff that was going to places like the Congo and Iraq. Today we've got £8 billion a year earmarked for UK research and innovation grants. This is the UKRI, which I must confess I didn't know anything about. No. But amongst the things that they're giving away, the University of Exeter was awarded £247,000 for a project on queer nature's animals, environment and modern sexual knowledge production. The UKRI also funds private sector research software firm Clusivity, £214,000 to them for AI robots to help make companies more accessible to non-binary and LGBTQ plus minorities. This is a joke, isn't it?
Elon, do you fancy popping over and having a look at our wastage?
I mean, for God's sake.
But yet again, this is the Donald Trump effect.
Yeah.
Because he's come in, him and his administration are going, let's look at the nonsense expenditure.
Yes.
Let's cut waste. Let's do it. Hats off to Harry Cole for picking up the ball and running with it in the Sun and identifying all this utter tripe, this wicked waste of money. And it is a wicked waste of money.
It really is.
It really is.
And it's our money, by the way.
£199,000 to a university so that they can examine TikTok dance videos, right, and whatever relevance they might have to the price of bacon.
Yeah.
I mean, what an utter nonsense.
It really is
when
ridiculous.
We had pensioners sitting cold in their own homes because their winter fuel allowance was taken away from them.
Frightened to put the heating on.
And we are wasting money like this. This is what I mean when I say it is wicked waste of money.
Absolutely right. Speaking of a wicked waste of money, let's talk about Rachel Reeves. We've got this from John, who says Starmer seems to have been interviewed in front of a giant toilet seat. Behind it, I suspect, is Britain's economy, and Rachel Reeves ripped up 4th draft of her CV. Because, unbelievably, in the Times today, page 11, Rachel Reeves wrongly claims to have worked published in one of the world's leading economics journals, raising more questions about exaggerations on her CV. The Charlton's entry in Who's Who lists her as a contributor to the Journal of Political Economy, when in fact she has published a single article in a more modest publication, the European Journal of Political Economy. What's wrong with this woman? She's just a compulsive liar, or what?
Well, you know, in movies, sometimes they have titles, or the main characters are given titles like, you know, the Terminator, or the Exterminator. Yeah. Well, I think we need to call Rachel the Exaggerator.
The Exaggerator,
Reeves.
I like it.
She's the Exaggerator.
She is. Yeah.
Everything she
writes down isn't true.
Yeah, it's exaggerated.
She's a liar, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you're being very generous there with that word exaggerator.
Yeah, but I think it kind of fits, you know what I mean? Coming into Whitehall, the Exaggerator.
It's a kind of sickness, though, isn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Doesn't it tell you something about the woman's psyche, that she can't lie straight in bed? She has to come up with some kind of, flowery version of what her actual life has been like. She has to pretend that she's done something she hasn't done. And it's not as if she hasn't done anything. I mean, she's already achieved a great deal in her career. She's already become a Labour MP. She got elected. She's had a couple of decent jobs. She's now in one of the highest offices of the land. Why does she have to keep lying?
She's been an MP since 2010, 14, 15 years. That's no mean achievement.
Yeah.
And she now occupies one of the highest offices of state.
Right.
So why can't you just be truthful about things? I mean, this latest story today, it's almost the equivalent of claiming to have written a front-page article for the Times, whereas actually you had a letter published in the Dagenham and Redbridge Observer.
I went to NASA once in Houston, right? Actually, I went to Cape Canaveral as well. But it's like me saying, I went up into space. I didn't go up into space. I went to doorstep some astronauts who were coming back from space, and when they landed in Florida, they got straight on a plane and went to Houston. And I had to ring the office and go, they've gone to Texas, and they went, all right, get a plane over there. But I didn't go up into space to talk to them. So it's a bit like that, isn't it?
But come on, Mike, the Rocket Man Graham, has got a ring to it.
It has. It's true. Maybe I should just start lying. How about this? Allies of Reeves say that there was no record of how the entry had come to be made, or who had approved the description of her publication record, which has consistently been listed under her name in Who's Who since she became an MP in 2010. So it's been there ever since. Now, I don't know how Who's Who works. I suspect they ask you what you would like to have as your entry. Because she's now got form for this, because she claims that the reason her LinkedIn information was incorrect was because some aide, a stupid person, had made up some stuff and put it in there. Well, surely they would show you what they were putting in. If I don't have a secretary, but if I had a secretary and she wanted to put something on LinkedIn on my behalf, she would probably show it to me and go, this is what it's going to look like. Is that all right,
Governor?
Is that all right?
Right?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd sign it off, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You wouldn't just go, yeah, just put whoever you like down.
Yeah.
Just tell them I'm an astronaut and also I've driven Formula 1 cars and I once sailed around the world. That's fine. Just put it all down.
Yeah. I heard one of the more lunatic left broadcasters the other day trying to defend her. Because, of course, you know that she said, the best part of a decade she worked at the Bank of England.
Yes.
Whereas, as a matter of fact, it was 5 years and 7 months.
Years, yeah.
Now, I don't think 5 years and 7 months really constitutes the best part of a decade.
Not really.
Mathematically speaking,
yes,
it might be more than half of a decade.
If we're rounding up to a factor of 5, yes.
Yes.
But most people don't do that.
No. And he was trying to defend it, saying that, strictly speaking, it is the best part of a decade.
Oh, for God's sake.
And
that can only be one person I can think of that would come up with that sort
I
of
only
rubbish.
dip in occasionally because I want to know what the enemy's
I agree.
thinking.
No, it's got to be done. It's got to be done.
And it was just absolutely pathetic. And I don't know. This government promised us change, didn't they?
They did.
And yet all we seem to be getting is more of the same.
Well, it's worse than that. It's not more of the same. It's actually worse than what went before. I mean, old Starmer's making Rishi Sunak look like, one of the greatest prime ministers ever. Yeah. And Jeremy Hunt looks like one of the greatest chancellors of all time. She's talking about now slashing civil service budgets by 11%. That's not going to happen.
Because her stupid budget hasn't worked. When you start hiking national insurance contributions and raising the minimum wage again, employers go, this is going to cost me a fortune. Yeah. And everybody could have seen that coming, apart from Rachel, the exaggerator, Reeves.
From accounts. Brilliant. One story that before we get any more serious about the prisons, which I want to talk to you about in a minute, a lab-grown teeth is what I'm going to put to you. This is on page 11 of the Telegraph. Teeth grown in a lab could soon end the need for implants and dentures, according to experts. Cells from wisdom teeth combined with pig teeth I'm sorry, I can't take this story seriously. Can be cultivated in a lab and implanted to fill a gap left by a lost tooth. Well, hang on. They're saying you won't need implants, but these are going to be implanted. So apparently they could be used to replace any type of tooth within 20 years, according to Professor Pamela Yellick from Tufts University in Boston. I'm not sure I want pig teeth in my mouth, do you?
No, although it might have helped Ed Miliband eating a bacon sandwich all those years ago, mightn't it?
It might have done. Cannibalism, though.
I'm not blessed with the best Hampsteads, you know what I mean? Yeah. Born in the late 50s and all of that.
Well, I have Scottish teeth, which is why most of my teeth now are actually artificially created.
Right.
But they're not dentures.
Right.
Because they've just come out. But yeah, I mean, British teeth are famous, aren't they? People's teeth has become a completely different thing now. When you and I grew up, everybody had bad teeth.
Yeah, exactly.
And suddenly now people have got nice teeth and implants and,
You jump on a plane, go to Turkey, and come back with a set of Hampsteads like whiter than the driven snow.
I was talking to somebody who works on a cabin crew, right, for an airline, which I won't mention, which goes backwards and forwards to Turkey, and she was telling me that on the way back from Turkey, you've literally got people sitting there, bandaged heads, they've got bum lifts to be going, they can't sit properly. The whole plane, particularly like during the winter months, everyone's been to Turkey for some kind of operation.
And the cabin crew have to wear sunglasses because everybody's teeth are dazzling.
Gleaming, absolutely right. Yeah. Turkey teeth, absolutely incredible.
I like the ones who come back and the teeth are too big and they can't jump properly.
Oh, my God. Right, 6:32. We're going to talk about prisons in a minute because apparently David Gork, one of the world's worst politicians, has done a review into why prisons aren't working. And he's concluded, basically, that we've put too many people in them. Brilliant. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:34. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Alex Phillips in for Julie Hartley-Brewer all this week, of course. Peter Blexley's here with us. According to the Times this morning, tough talk by ministers has left prisons on the brink. Basically, David Gauke, who used to be the Justice Secretary under the Conservatives and wasn't particularly good at it, to be honest, was given the brief to sort of review, basically, the situation with our prisons. It's called the Independent Sentencing Review. He says, basically, knee-jerk and ill-considered attempts by ministers to show they are tough on crime have left prisons on the brink of collapse. I mean, I'm not quite sure what he expects prisons to be.
Before I really get stuck into this, if I may just indulge myself for a moment, I'm thinking of writing a Freedom of Information Act application to find out how much Gauke's getting paid.
Yeah,
and how much is this review
It'll be
costing?
6 figures, won't it?
It's got to be a huge amount of money. And what was he doing before he got this gig? Probably sitting at home on his rear end. I don't know.
After he got deselected by his constituents.
Exactly. So to get into the story itself, surprise, surprise. OK, the prisons are full. Yes, politicians dating back to Blair in '97 with his tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime, have repeatedly for 30-odd years talked about being tough on crime because, funnily enough, that chimes with the public.
Yes.
The public who have had their houses burgled, their cars stolen, their phones nicked, have been assaulted, know loads of other people that have been victims of crime, that have had a murder in their neighbourhood or in their borough or in their county or not too far away from home, and are sick to death of criminals ruling the streets rather than the police. And even people who don't particularly like the police would far rather they had some element of control over it rather than the free-rein criminals have got these days. So, of course, tough on crime leads to more people being locked up, longer sentences, hurrah for that, because it protects the public while they're in jail, and we haven't got enough jail space. So, is Gauke in this article talking about building more prisons? No, he's talking about finding ways to let more people out.
To let more people out and not put so many people in prison. I mean, the report apparently blames successive governments for increasing the severity of sentences, which has led to the length of jail terms increasing by 40% since 1993. Well, forgive me, Mr Gauke, but you were part of a previous government that didn't do anything about that. So why did you not decide, when you were in the Justice Secretary's chair, to build a few more bleeding prisons?
Exactly.
That might be a question for him.
Indeed. And of course, I do completely, utterly accept and embrace that punishment without rehabilitation is a waste of time. But that's why I have my unique plan for the prison system, which I wish Gauke would pick up the phone and talk to me about. And that is, I wouldn't send anybody to prison for a term less than 4 years. So anybody that went to jail will be getting 4 years as an absolute bare minimum. I would find suitable alternative punishments for people who hadn't hit that bar of seriousness or repeat offending to trigger the 4-year sentence. And of course, if people didn't abide by those community punishments, which I don't really like the expression of, but I would want them to be visible. I'd want to see people in groups, high vis, people driving past going, they're the people who have committed crime. They're doing their visible punishment so we can see it. But Gauke here is talking about electronic monitoring and basically putting people under house arrest. Well, in a day and age where you've got Deliveroo, Ocado, all these other things, you might as well be in a hotel. Because you'd be under house arrest, you can have everything delivered to you.
Brought to you, absolutely right.
Including sex workers. Goodness knows
drugs,
what else.
Presumably.
Drugs.
All sorts of things. I mean, according to this this report, they're now saying that the average custodial sentence has lengthened. It used to be 16 months. It's now 22.5 months. So still very much below what you're suggesting, which would be 48 months, right?
Indeed.
And also, they're saying the rate of reoffending has gone massively through the roof as well. It used to be shorter than 12 months. 56.9% of people apparently now, 37.2% of those leaving jail are likely to be be caught reoffending. So there's no reason for you to not want to go back to prison, because prison's obviously all right. Surely they should hate prison so much they don't want to go back.
They would if every person went to prison for a minimum of 4 years. You imagine how many people who were sitting in a pub on a Friday night, for example, with their mates, foolishly, recklessly and illegally getting that third pint in their hand. You imagine how many of their mates might turn around and say, is that pint really worth 4 years? Because that's what you're going to get. So these dirty, stinking paedophiles who download all those images and get suspended sentences. No. Completely different landscape. 4 years minimum, mate, off your trot.
And there's another story. It's in The Sun on page 2. More than 100 child sex abuse images are being recorded by police every day by paedophiles. There are 38,685 incidents logged by forces in England and Wales in the past year. That's extraordinary. And you will know, as you've just alluded to, most of those people aren't going anywhere near a prison.
These are only the crimes, the images that are shared and distributed and created that the police know about. They're only the ones that come to their attention. I strongly fear that number is dwarfed by the real amount, the ones they don't find, the ones they can't track down, the ones they simply have no idea about. It's on an epidemic scale. And as long as these filthy pedos who pleasure themselves with the most vile images, videos and the such like are not suitably punished, then this will show no sign of abating whatsoever.
No, it absolutely won't. Here's an unusual one in the papers today. Lots of them have got this story. The Mail's done it on page 5. A judge from Uganda, who works for the United Nations, no less, is accused of keeping a woman as a slave at his home near Oxford, right?
Yes.
Apparently, this United Nations judge, she's a woman, Lydia Mugambi, who sits in the Ugandan High Court, conspired to bring a woman to the UK to look after her children for free. She then withheld her passport, so the alleged victim would have to beg for her identity documents if she needed them, the jury was told. So, you know, unbelievable, right?
Well, this story, as told, as you say, on page 5 of the Mail today.
It's in some of the other papers. On Oxford Crown Court.
It started yesterday. These are the opening comments as laid out by the prosecution. She hasn't yet been convicted of any crime. I just need to make that clear. But it is a very interesting case in so much as that somebody who is studying for a PhD at Oxford and who is a United Nations judge is arrested, charged and put on trial with serious allegations made against them. I will be keeping a very keen eye on this case and see how it pans out. I think the trial is expected to last about 3 weeks. So maybe we'll be discussing this again in the future.
I dare say we will. Miracle escape as plane flips over. Amazing picture from a plane that landed came from Minneapolis. I think it was landing somewhere near Toronto Pearson International Airport, and it's actually upside down. And incredibly, despite the fact that it's upside down, there were some injuries on the flight, but it was relatively, most of the passengers were able to walk off it.
3 people seriously injured, apparently, but astonishingly, 80 people or thereabouts have walked away from this plane unharmed.
Unbelievable.
And it's absolutely on its roof, upside down, with a wing missing by all accounts. So from what happened there,
From what I've been hearing on the news, it may have one of the wings may have touched the runway as it was coming in. So I don't know if it was windy or something, but a bloke called John Nelson is quoted basically being out of breath, filing something on Facebook saying, "We just landed, our plane crashed, it's upside down, most people are going to be okay."
Yeah, and
of course, terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah, like all airports, they've got fire brigades on hand and they covered it in foam to prevent any fire breaking out. A very, very fortunate escape, it looks like, for many people.
It does.
So that's a story
piece
of
kind good news for a change.
Yeah, it is. It's a joyous thing that so many people got away unharmed, and I hope those who were injured make a speedy recovery.
Absolutely right. Now, coming up, we're going to talk about Gen Z, and one of your favourite subjects, Peter.
Oh, yes.
And food, because apparently people who are younger are frightened of eating food that might be out of date, so much so that they throw it away early. Unbelievable stuff. This is Talk. I'm Mike Graham. Morning Glory. More after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:46. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Like Tony Blair, what part of our army is not equipped and not capable of taking a part in major conflict does he not understand? It would be murder to send them to Ukraine, says Mick in Wallington. And Shane in Lincolnshire says, morning Mike, I have a potential answer to the illegal migration problem and the Ukraine war. Set up the British Foreign Legion and all illegal migrants of fighting age are conscripted into it, trained and sent to Ukraine to defend it. At the end of the war or after 5 years service, whichever is longer, they are granted UK citizenship. I mean, it's a nice theory, that, but I guess it's a bit difficult to train up a bunch of people who are going to be sent to fight for a country that's not technically theirs.
And that they don't want to fight for.
Yeah, right.
I saw somebody on social media yesterday and I called him out. Somebody whose profile describes himself as a former asylum seeker, so now granted asylum, living in Manchester, saying that they wouldn't fight for this country.
Oh, yeah.
And you go, oh, right, OK.
So what are you doing here then?
So you like the benefits of it, do you? But you wouldn't fight for it.
Outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, it is truly appalling. And again, when I hear people talking about national service, for example, being brought back, and I think that's an argument that does have some considerable merit.
Yes.
But then think about the poor army that would have to deal with them all. You know, and is the army...
And people also raise the question, you know, do you really want some of these ne'er-do-wells being trained to actually know how to kill people?
Yeah, to use a weapon.
To use a weapon and all of that.
It's not the 50s, it's not the 1950s. They simply wouldn't be able to instill the type of discipline necessary to make a national service programme work,
no, exactly.
Unfortunately.
That is the problem. Well, Gen Z, we talk about them quite a lot of the time. I mean, many of these people also would not fight for their country because they've said so in a recent survey in the Times.
Yep.
This morning we find out that Gen Z and millennials, who are a bit older than them, are the least likely to rely on what's called the sniff test, and instead they will throw food away before it's out of date, which I find extraordinary.
I owe the world a huge apology.
Go on.
I fathered a millennial and I fathered 2 Gen Zs.
Right.
OK?
Right.
The only saving grace I have is that my youngest is going to join the army later this year.
So that you must have done a reasonable job there.
Well, I mean, the millennial is the Lord Chief Justice of the Wokery Department.
OK, right.
So we have some very interesting conversations.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that, you know, at least one of them is willing to serve and die for their country.
Yes.
Which might offset the wokery of the others.
As long as he's not eating any out-of-date yoghurt or cheese or anything.
Well, he's an absolute gym lad and he's a fitness fanatic and all that, so he'll be fine in the army.
Yeah, OK.
And he's very, very careful about what he eats. But his mother, my wife, we have long jokes,
Blexley,
is on a systematic campaign to murder me.
Right.
Because I often find that she has fed me stuff that has gone past its use by date.
But that's good, though. That's a good thing, because, I mean, food is so much food is wasted in this country. I mean, even by supermarkets. I mean, how often do you go into a supermarket and you go and buy some salad or something, right? Not that I do that very often, but I do notice that when you do, it's like, it's out of date like that day. And you're going, well, hang on a minute, so I have to eat all of it now? Or what's the deal, you know? People sometimes, and according to this piece in the Telegraph, best before dates are a guideline for when food is supposed to be used by, but the labels indicate whether it's safe or not, and the younger generations apparently have got a limited understanding of food safety, and because they don't really understand how to cook anything, they basically are throwing stuff out before it's even gone past its sell-by date.
The younger generations have a very limited understanding of a number of things, not just used by dates and sell by dates, like discipline, manners, courtesy, and much, much more.
And working in an office, even.
In an office?
In an office.
You're breaching my human rights. I can stay at home 5 days a week, sit in my pyjamas, drink cups of coffee, and I want a 6-figure salary.
I was wandering around in Borough Market yesterday, and even though it was shut, because it's half-term, there's kids everywhere. You know, people are bringing their kids into town, which is lovely, taking them into restaurants, which is also nice. But at the end of the day, you're kind of going, what are you doing the rest of the time? Why have you come into London if you never came here before? You know, why did you actually decide to leave the house for purposes of leisure rather than for purposes of work? Because normally on a Monday, Borough Market is completely deserted because nobody bothers coming to work.
Wasn't there a bank last week that said, if you don't come back to work 5 days a week, we're going to fire you?
Yes, there was.
That's wonderful.
That is wonderful.
That really
But
is.
I've got to ask you the obvious question, which is, what's the sort of the oldest and probably the most ridiculous thing you've eaten? I did an overnight show once on Talk Sport when I used to do that years ago, and actually had people go into their fridge, pull out the oldest thing they had in it, and some of the stuff was unbelievable. You know, like relish that you get in a hamper, for example. You know, that stuff that you never open, which has been there literally for about 5 years. I once gave my kids some peanut butter that was 7 years old.
Yeah.
And I've regularly eaten. I've quite often I'll buy eggs, and then they've gone out of date, say by about 2 months. Not a problem. I've never been ill because of food that I've eaten.
Yeah. My late mother-in-law, rest her soul, lived the final years of her life in Portugal, and we were out there visiting her on one occasion, and she asked the boys, they were only kids at the time, if they'd like some brownies.
Oh, yeah.
And they said, oh, yes, please, Grandma. So she reaches into the back of the cupboard and pulls out a brownie mix, makes up these brownies, whacks them in the oven.
Yeah.
We eat them about an hour later or whenever it is they've cooled down a bit.
Yeah.
And we looked at each other a little bit old-fashioned, you know. They weren't exactly great.
Right.
But they're edible and nobody became ill or anything like that. My wife fished the packet out the bin a bit later on, and they'd expired, or their use-by date. It was similar to your peanut butter, something like 5, 6, 7 years out of date.
Yeah. Unbelievable. I used to work in a bakery, as I've often told the story, in a very expensive part of London, in Hampstead. Hungarian confectionery it was, and some of the stuff that went on there you wouldn't want to tell anybody at all. You know, one bloke once was mixing, we used to make these sort of rum truffles, I suppose we used to call them, but they were basically was made up from all the junk that everybody else had cut off, all the other bits of the cake, and just mixed it up. And you'd put some cocoa powder in, and you put some sugar in, and it all tasted great. But it was just literally the stuff that was cut off, the leftovers of everything else. And one time, a guy cut his finger, and the end of his finger fell into it. And the boss of the place just went, just don't matter, it doesn't matter, you can't find it, just you know, it'll turn up somewhere, and it went out. I mean, it just did. I mean, that was in the 1970s, of course, where we didn't really have any health and safety, and we used to get a health inspector visiting once in a while. But you know, I mean, you'd get fruit that would be rotten, and you cut the rotten bit off and just put it in the flan anyway. You know, that was commercial cooking in those days.
And every customer lived to tell the tale.
Yeah, they did. And the guy who ran the place had a Rolls Royce. He was making that much money.
There you go.
You know, unbelievable stuff. Also, let us talk about the foreign shovel attacker, which we didn't mention earlier on. Slovakia. This is the latest. The Telegraph have been great on this all week, all last week.
Wonderful campaign.
You know, wonderful campaign. They've got a rich vein of stories. This is on page 6 of the Telegraph. A Slovakian jailed over a shovel attack on a woman during a violent brawl has been allowed to stay in Britain after claiming that he's been rehabilitated. Now, this is a guy who was jailed for 15 months for his part in an attack. Going back again to your thing about 4 years. He gets 15 months for attacking a woman with a shovel. For heaven's sake.
Yeah, which was part of a mass brawl in a pub car park with a number of people injured, knocked to the ground, all that kind of thing. A very, very unpleasant set of circumstances. It was car part of a community centre in Stoke-on-Trent.
Very nice.
So, anyway, he gets nicked, goes to prison, serves his time, and the Home Office say, this is not a sort of person we want in the UK. We will deport him.
Yes.
And guess what?
Fair enough.
He appeals, OK? And this violent criminal... Now, let me point out, he had a number of previous convictions, this bloke. This was not his first brush with the law.
No, of course not.
A man who has been arrested and convicted on a number of occasions before. So he has proven repeatedly that he has no respect for the law of our land. He has no respect for our customs. He breaks the law. He goes to jail. He's an absolute wrong-un who should be handcuffed, put on a plane and flown back to Slovakia.
Thank you.
Right? But, of course, he, this unworthy, has the great good fortune to go on an immigration trial, which is being presided over by, remember the name, Judge Christopher John Hanson.
They've always got 3 names, haven't they?
Yeah.
These judges.
Yeah, they're never like, you know, Mick Jones.
No. Well, we
not
played
the one of the Clash.
We played not that one. We played earlier, didn't we? The message from the Secretary of State for Homeland Security in the United States of America, who said quite categorically, if you come here illegally, you will be found, you will be deported, and you will never be allowed to stay here.
Yeah.
You know, very equivocal, very straightforward. Unfortunately, we don't have the same.
No, because we have the European Court of Human Rights.
Just ridiculous, isn't it?
You know, which is plaguing us at every move.
It really is. Let's get a quick voice note, because we played you a little clip earlier of Keir Starmer shuffling his papers in front of him because he can't actually make a statement without notes. This is from Jay. Have a listen.
Morning, Mike. Just a quick observation. How big is the writing on Starmer the Harmer's pieces of paper? Surely to God, if he was to make the writing smaller, he'd use less paper, saving more trees. Cheers, mate. Bye.
Well, there is that. He could save some more trees. I mean, he could just save a lot of trees by not going anywhere. I don't know where he's going the rest of the week, but he's been to Paris. He's come back, and we are none the wiser as to what. And the only reference we've really got to what he said and what he did is that Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, thinks it's a waste of time and it's premature and it's a really, really bad idea.
Can you imagine the training Starmer is going to require before he goes to meet Donald Trump?
No.
Can you imagine the focus groups who sat round there in a horseshoe with Starmer at the front saying, Mr Prime Minister, we think this should be the attitude you should adopt.
There'll be, as they like to call it in government circles, wargaming, all sorts of situations. Like, what if Donald Trump asks you this? What if he asks you that? What will you say? Will you be prepared to answer?
Well, I don't know. You're here to tell me. What do I say? What do I say?
Yeah, you won't know. No. Finally, I suppose we should do this one in the Sun. Page 13. 3 little pigs have been given a trigger warning because apparently people don't like the fact that the dad gets eaten by the big bad wolf. I mean, parents are buying £10 tickets for 3 to 7-year-olds and then be giving what they're describing as a very patronising message from the Chichester Festival Theatre's website.
Yes, bless the Chichester Festival Theatre, who are going to put on a production of 3 Little Pigs. That great, funny kind of, kids' story.
Kids love it.
Kids love to be scared, don't they, in a story?
Yeah.
Why do you think things like the Gruffalo was so popular?
Yeah.
Because, especially as a parent, if you tell it in a dramatic way and you really scare the
you ham it up,
as they're getting ready for their bedtime, go to sleep, they love it. Kids absolutely love it. And now, of course, they've got to get a trigger warning because guess what? The wolf might eat the pig.
Right.
Well, what a surprise.
Yes.
Mother Nature at work in a story. No.
Unbelievable. Chichester Festival Theatre, it turns out, previously came under fire for a Sound of Music trigger warning about Nazi Germany. Because apparently there are Nazis in the Sound of Music. Well, yeah, but, it's a musical, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was set in the Second World War.
Yeah. And the son I've spoken to a dad called Vaz Syed, bless him, who's 52. And Vaz says, I have 2 daughters and find it incredibly patronising that theatres feel the need to warn parents about something so trivial. It's laughable, and less of the big bad wolf and more the big bad woke.
Yes.
He's not wrong, is he, Vaz?
He really isn't. Absolutely right. Peter, great to see you as ever. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up after the break and the news, we're going to have Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor. We're also going to have Dan Hodges, commentator of the Mail on Sunday as well. One from Pat who says, Mike and Mr Blexley, there is only Starmer, who would appoint the head of our border fast, who actually lives on the opposite side of our border. Yeah, well, that's the guy in Finland, yeah. Starmer, of course, claimed that he wasn't going to live in Finland, but now it turns out he actually is, because he's going to be given permission to do that by the parliamentary committee that he answers to. I mean, there is no end to this nonsense. We'll bring you more and the rest of the day's news coming up right after this on Morning Glory.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oivamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham, and the sun is coming up over the skyline of London. It looking reasonably good. It's a bit cold still. We're talking about massive warm weather coming at the end of the week. I think I mentioned this yesterday. They're talking 17, 16 degrees. Might be time to open the sunroof on the car and that sort of thing. We're still talking, of course, about what's going on in Ukraine. Keir Starmer went yesterday to Paris to hold hands. I think we've seen that picture already, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to show it again. Holding hands with Emmanuel Macron. A sort of a bromance, which you might say. There it is. Quite a weird picture. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but it's one of the few people Emmanuel Macron could stand next to and make him look like he's taller. Because Keir Starmer's actually not a very tall guy, strangely enough. Not having any kind of, heightism thing going on here, but he's just not a very imposing figure. He's gone over to Paris and he's given them the idea that we should be putting some boots on the ground, some peacekeeping forces. We could be talking about a peace plan. He's trying to warn the United States that they should do this, that and the other, but nobody really is going for it. Even Olaf Scholz, Germany's outgoing chancellor, who's about as woke as they come, said that Keir Starmer's suggestions were completely premature and highly inappropriate. He also said he was a bit irritated about the fact that Keir Starmer seems to have taken it upon himself to be the kind of spokesperson for the European Union, which of course he's no longer in. It's all very strange. Meanwhile, the real meeting is going to kick off today between Marco Rubio and Sergei Lavrov over in Saudi Arabia, which is where the proper peace will be settled between the Americans and the Russians. And we will no doubt, of course, hear all about that as it turns out and as it happens. We're going to be talking as well this morning about Rachel Reeves. She's done yet another blunder in one of her Who's Who entries. She's alleged that she wrote for a particular very highly respected journal when in fact she didn't. 38,000 crimes a year being committed by paedophiles, which is a terribly high number. And also David Gauke, one of the worst Justice Secretaries in the history of justice, has just put out a report into the prison system and basically blamed politicians for locking too many people up. That's why we have a crisis in the prisons. Absolutely incredible. More trouble for the BBC as well. Doctor Who has become so woke that nobody's watching it anymore, and it may disappear from view altogether. 0344 499 1000. Gen Z as well. They're so frightened of eating bad food that they throw it out before it reaches its sell-by date. Absolutely unbelievable. This is, of course, Morning Glory. Isabel Oakeshott coming up. We're going to talk to Dan Hodges a little bit later on the show as well. Let's get a voice note from Sam.
Morning, Mike. Fantastic show as always. We don't need no Starmer nation. We don't need no thought control to have an idiot in number 10. Hey, Starmer, leave us Brits alone.
Very good, Sam. Thank you very much indeed. Absolutely. Apologies to anybody from Pink Floyd who might be listening to that, thinking he's completely butchered us. Never mind. This is, of course, the home of common sense. We're going to be talking loads of it between now and 10 o'clock. Let's get it on. Marco says this: Starmer's tactic of putting UK troops into Ukraine is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Do you really think putting us in the firing line of one of the most technologically advanced armies on the planet is a good idea when we can fit the entirety of our own forces into one football stadium? Well, that's quite a good point, Marco, and I think Isabel Oakeshott may well elaborate on the same coming up right now. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Morning. Sorry, the only reason I'm smiling is because I love that Pink Floyd version.
Yeah, leave us Brits alone. I think it could become an anthem, that couldn't it? Because I mean, you and I were speaking about this yesterday, and it's very clear that the Europeans, much as we don't have much time for them, equally have as little time for Keir Starmer as we do.
Well, Keir Starmer is a desperate Prime Minister in search of a good war, knowing entirely well that it is a completely fake proposal. Keir Starmer knows completely well that you can't send some kind of raggle-taggle gypsy crew of willing volunteers from around Europe to go to Ukraine to, as he puts it, be peacekeepers, because there's no structure within which to do that. Right. Who would command them? What precisely is the mission? Troops don't just go out to a country and kind of operate randomly. It has to be under some kind of structure. And much as many EU member states might like it, and maybe Starmer himself might like it, there is no EU defence force. That's a project that was tried and failed for many, many years. It failed because we've got a much better structure. It's called NATO. And if British troops were to go out to Ukraine, whether they went on their own or with perhaps the French or Italians, by the way, not many other nations would be worth having. I mean, they don't have enough troops really to make a meaningful contribution. Then Putin would regard those as NATO forces, and they would have to be commanded by some kind of NATO structure, just as they were in Afghanistan. The ISAF forces were basically under NATO. So Starmer knows this, or if he doesn't know this, then he doesn't even have the most basic grasp of international defence. And I think all he's trying to do here is do what this desperate Labour government does all the time, and get a headline for a day or two. And in that sense, it's worked, because he's got a headline which in a sense makes him sound tough and as if he's playing some kind of leading role. I'm ready to send troops. But it's all a complete fiction, isn't it? And I also think that he's trying to lay a trap here. I think this is a bit of a political plot. If he could engineer a vote on this in the Commons, well, wouldn't that be good theatre for him? Because he would then force the other parties to show how they're going to position themselves on this. And I think he might have a particular eye here to reform, because he knows that reform would really struggle to support any such nonsensical proposal. Reform doesn't believe in EU defence groupings. Reform believes in NATO. And so they would find it, I imagine, very difficult to support this. And then what would happen? Keir Starmer and his allies would present them as pro-Russian. It's all terribly predictable, isn't it?
And do you think, actually, I'm sure you're right here, that there are those kinds of conversations actually going on behind the front door of Downing Street? Because people like Morgan McSweeney, who's consistently being described as some kind of, a strategic genius. I've yet to see it myself. I don't really know exactly how they come to that conclusion. But it seems to me that everything that they do is based upon, can we get everybody to hate somebody else so that they don't actually hate us? That seems to be the kind of logic, doesn't it?
I mean, maybe what you're asking is, are they smart enough to have come up with this plot to try to put other MPs on the back foot? And I mean, maybe they're not smart enough. And I think the thing is with the Commons vote, and there was a lot of calls for that last night. We saw Ed Davey, the elusive leader of the Liberal Democrats, saying if we're going to send troops, we're going to need to have a Commons vote. I mean, he's getting well ahead of himself there. Right. He's fallen for the Starmer spin because there is no proposal that Starmer can put in front of the Commons at the moment. But were there to be a vote, then, you know, that would be interesting politics. And MPs, there are still MPs in the Commons that remember with embarrassment the shambles over the vote on intervening in Syria after President Assad crossed that red line and used chemical weapons against his own troops. And there are a lot of sort of bruised feelings about that. And then subsequently, you know, some prime ministers have felt, actually, I'm not sure I'm going to bother with a Commons vote because that caused such global embarrassment. But look, it's not going to come to that, because there's nothing to vote on. No. Well, Ed Davey seems to spend most of his time thinking the enemy is not actually Vladimir Putin, it's Donald Trump. You know, he keeps tweeting about how terrible Donald Trump is and how we must stand up to him as if he's some kind of tyrant that's wreaking havoc in Britain, you know, which he isn't doing. He's trying to solve a conflict that's been going on for 3 years by having a very meaningful meeting in Saudi Arabia, which we're not really involved in and never will be involved in. So, you know, it's all a bit of a nonsense. The fact that the European leaders even met yesterday is kind of pathetic in and of itself. I mean, meanwhile, I'm looking at the front page of the Telegraph today. Angela Rayner, for some god-awful reason, has decided to go to Ethiopia. You know, what's that all about? What, to see if she can find some evidence of how British taxpayer money is being abused on some kind of, let's build, I don't know, some kind of grass mountain in a, you know, fertile Ethiopia. Just one point I do want to make before we finish up on Ukraine. Doesn't this suit President Putin perfectly to see Europe divided over how to handle Ukraine? There's so much naivety here among European leaders and people like Ed Davey, who thinks it does anything other than play into Russia's hands to have us all divided and arguing over this, to have the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz for once saying something I think most of the nation, the British nation, can agree with, that he's irritated by Keir Starmer. That's putting it diplomatically compared to how the rest of us feel, I can tell him. Yeah, absolutely right. I've just got a bit of breaking news. I'll get your reaction to this. The Office for National Statistics have released some new figures on UK average earnings. They've risen by 3.4%. Now, I suppose those people who don't understand economics will say, oh, that's probably good news, isn't it? But basically, that is only because the government has fed a load of big pay rises to the public sector. Surely 15% to train drivers and other staff on the railways, 22% to junior doctors, you know, God knows what else they've been giving to people in the civil service. It's entirely driven by public sector pay rises, isn't it? Well, I don't know what proportion of that is public sector and what proportion of it is private, but anyone in the business world at the moment will tell you just how nervous the business community is and how lacking in confidence they are about the direction of the British economy. So I don't imagine that private wages in the private sector are exactly skyrocketing. And this brings us to another angle on the defence side of things. You know, Starmer's been under pressure to raise the percentage of GDP that we spend on defence. Well, if the economy is flatlining as it is, it doesn't matter if you raise the percentage. You're not actually going to get any more bang for your buck, are you? What he really needs to do, and what could actually serve defence very well, is get the economy growing. And it's not going to happen just by Rachel Reeves going, growth, I'm going for growth. They both sound the same, don't they? Yeah. The only thing that seems to be growing for Rachel Reeves is the length of her nose, with every sort of Pinocchio-like finding that we get. This morning, we've got Who's Who listing her as a contributor to the Journal of Political Economy, when in fact she's not. And, you know, it's been there since 2010 when she first became an MP. Well, journalists are having a great time, aren't they, going through every single claim that Rachel Reeves has ever made and unpicking it and finding that it's all quite exaggerated. I don't think any of this would matter as much if she was actually seen to be doing a really good job. But time's running out for her to produce her mythical growth. And although she had a little respite in the last week, I think, when those figures came out and we hadn't actually dipped into negative, it's not really a cause for celebration to be 0.1% up, is it?
It really isn't. We've got some more stats here coming in thick and fast at the moment. The UK unemployment rate for people aged 16 and over was estimated at 4.4% in October to December 2024, which has in fact risen. And I think the rate for people who are now economically inactive is estimated at 21.5%, which is huge, isn't it? I mean, I don't understand what they're doing with these unemployment figures, really.
I mean, that figure is absolutely astonishing. You know, the truth is we're not a nation that is absolutely riddled with genuinely sick people who are completely incapable of making some contribution to the economy. And when you look at the size of the proportion of the UK budget that is spent on the welfare state and the NHS, together they contribute, basically make up half of everything we spend. And unless the government actually tackles this unbelievable bloating of the welfare state, then it's hard to see how our country really makes great progress. You know, we're basically just dishing out benefits here, there and everywhere. And as a result of which, you've got more people who don't feel the need to be economically active. And of course, there are people who genuinely can't be, and they should be supported. But if you make it too easy to be economically inactive, well, guess what? Human nature says, actually, I'd prefer to do very little in exchange for a decent income paid for by someone else.
Yeah, absolutely right. I've got to finish up by asking you about wasted food, because, you know, you obviously, you know, have children, you cook for them, you have food in the fridge that's probably been there for far too long. Gen Zers, apparently, are now throwing food away before they even get to the sell-by date because they're frightened that it might harm them. I mean, I can't believe this. I mean, I'm always eating stuff that's out of date.
Good bit of mould doesn't do you any harm, does it? You know, just scrape it off and on you go.
Exactly. I've scraped it off bread, I've cut it off crusts, I've cut it off cheese.
All of it. So, Mike, I have to say, I was clearing out the cupboards at the weekend and was horrified to discover some vegetarian sausage rolls from Christmas. They were basically dusty green bullets. Even that was a step too far for me, I don't
think they go off, do they? Vegan, vegetarian food. I mean, you just keep it for about 100 years.
There was a reason no one had eaten them, let's put it.
Excellent. Good to see you. Isabel, thank you very much indeed. Isabel Oakeshott talks international editor there, talking about a great many things, including the hopelessness of Keir Starmer's plan for Ukraine. Even the Germans don't think it's a good idea. It's 18 minutes past 7. I've got this from Vern. We were talking earlier about observationary activity. A few years ago, he says, I saw a drug deal outside the shop next to my shop. Told the police the number plate. A few weeks later, the shop was raided and police found a gun, some bullets and a silencer. The people involved were Polish and Albanian, says Vern in Southampton. Well, this is the thing. I mean, you know, it's so brazen now, the way that it happens in London, that surely to goodness, police, as Peter Blexley illustrated to me, would be able to arrest these people or certainly start questioning them when they're doing what can only be described as dubious activity on the streets of our city. They don't seem to want to, though, which is a bit weird. This is Morning Glory. Coming up, we're going to speak to Mike Jones, political commentator from formerly Migration Watch. We'll talk to him about some of the stuff that's going on around the deportation of people. This is Talk.
We sent £5 million to Iraq on a transforming feminist funding project. My personal favourite, £500,000 to Albania so that it could buy electric Porsches for its prison system. I mean, I'm not against the concept of a big economy like ours, a rich economy trying to help some of the developing nations, although I think we certainly should be cutting back on it in these present financial circumstances.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense, the one place to be where the nation comes to talk. There's a very nice sunrise going on right now outside the window. I can see a great big orange ball rising in the sky, which presumably means that we're going to have another dry day, which would be nice. No action, talk only is NATO, says Mike in Erith. Stop the money and we'll stop the war. Morning, Mike, says Lex. Starmer sending troops to the Ukraine again. How many times is this? 6th or 7th time we're sending them now. Alex in Devon. One from John, who says, Mike, I've heard that the only way the government can sack Rachel from accounts is her lies on her CV, as if Starmer sacks her for her budget. It means he doesn't agree with her fiscal savings, which would look bad on him, and he would have to resign as well if he sacks her for this reason. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, John Rentoul, who I've had many conversations with this about, more or less wrote at the weekend that he's now moving away from his previous position, which was that Rachel Reeves can't be sacked because it would look bad on the Prime Minister. But nowadays, of course, because of her continued ridiculousness about telling lies and disguising the truth about what she's actually done previously in her life, and there's another story out today about a Who's Who entry, that actually, if in fact she can be proven to have been so dishonest that she should never have got the job, he could use that as a reason to get rid of her, and it would be quite convenient, and he wouldn't have to say then that the economic policy that the government's been pursuing is entirely wrong-headed. He could just say, well, Rachel Reeves is no longer fit for purpose because she lied to get to where she is. And it's as simple as that, really. Let's talk to Mike Jones, political commentator, used to be with Migration Watch, of course. The UK claimant count, that means the number of people claiming universal credit and unemployment benefit, has reached 1.75 million people, right? But this is another ridiculous, shall we say, statistic. An estimated 52,000 working days were lost in December alone because of all sorts of labour disputes and strikes across the United Kingdom. 52,000 working days. I mean, that is incredible, isn't it? Just ridiculous. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Just before I talk to Mike, have a look at Kemi Badenoch. She was talking yesterday, and she's done a big interview in the Daily Mail today. You might say there's not a lot of point in that, and there's not a lot of point in Kemi Badenoch right now, but she's basically saying it's time to get off our knees and start fighting for Western values. Here she is talking about why she thinks immigration is far too high.
Immigration is far too high. We cannot support all those who wish to come to our country. We have no obligation to do so. The British people must come first. Our country is not racist. We don't need to apologise. We don't need to pay reparations or give away the Chagos silence. Free speech matters. Some cultures are better than others, and it's only contentious to say this because honesty has become impossible. People should not be afraid to speak out. We will be proud of our country. Most of all, we need to get up off our knees and start fighting not just for the UK, but for the West and our values again.
It's almost as though the Tories hadn't been in power for 14 years, isn't it? Mike, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Great to be here.
I'm not quite sure. I don't wish to be unkind to Kemi Badenoch, because I interviewed her and Robert Jenrick before the vote was taken on who should be in charge, and I actually said, and I endorsed her publicly, that Kemi Badenoch would do a better job. But she's kind of not doing it, and I'm wondering now, and I'm struggling to see what the point of her is.
Yeah, Kemi Badenoch's problem is that she's not really interested in public policy. I think she has her virtues. She's very good at networking. She's good at debates and she has a sharp tongue. But she really hasn't done the preparatory work for occupying a high position in office. And, that immigration speech that you just showed there, there's nothing on the surface I particularly disagree with. But, what are the policy implications of it?
Right.
You need a cap on various visas. You need a target. Is that net zero? Is it 100,000? Is it negative net migration? Is it 200,000? Right. We don't know because she's not specific.
Right. Because that's the thing, you're right. It's easy to say the things that she just said, that we must protect the British way of life. Well, what does that mean? Which part of the British way of life are you defending, and which bit of the way that Britain has become are you attacking? It's all very well to say people can't come here and just expect to be allowed to live here. Well, how are you going to stop them? There are so many more questions than answers at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she was quite specific on freedom of speech, and I do believe there is a conflict between mass immigration and free speech.
Yeah.
I think free speech is very unpopular globally. I think you do have to have quite a controlled population to maintain that, because you just have so much lobbying for blasphemy laws and all the rest of it. But yeah, there's a whole sort of panoply of stuff around immigration that doesn't just threaten the economy, but if you like the cultural architecture of your country.
Right. Well, let me play you this. Right. I don't know if you saw this, which you played earlier on in the show. It's Kristi Noem, who's the Border Security, Homeland Security sort of Secretary of State in the United States of America. Have a look at this if you want to know how to keep people out of your country.
I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump, for securing our border and putting America first. If you try to enter illegally, you will be caught, you will be removed, and you will never return. Follow the law, and you'll find opportunity. If you break it, you'll find consequences. Strong borders mean a stronger America. President Trump is making America safe again.
Can you imagine if we did a British version of that? You'd have some human rights lawyer standing in the corner going, no, you can't be deported because, your kid doesn't like chicken nuggets over in Albania, or, somebody's been rehabilitated, or, the paedophile has got children he needs to look after. We could never produce that, could we?
I think if you produced a video like that, the NGO human rights crowd would be up in arms. I mean, I remember the whole brouhaha over Theresa May having an advertisement on the back of a van saying, illegal immigrants should go back home, or something to that effect.
Right.
I mean, the amount of outrage over it was ridiculous. And I remember those red mugs that the Labour Party used to produce, it had strong border controls or whatever written on it. And there were sort of so many editorials and comment pieces in The Guardian. It was pretty crazy. But I think, President Trump is taking the US in a much better direction when it comes to immigration policy, because Joe Biden experimented with safe and legal routes, and they completely failed.
Right.
They actually had the opposite effect, where the amount of legal migration actually increased, but the numbers of illegals crossing from the US-Mexican border went up. So I think this is a welcome change from the Trump administration.
Absolutely. Sure. Well, thanks to Joe Biden, America suddenly became infested with illegal migrant gangs of people who had come from places as far away as Venezuela and Mexico, who were bringing all sorts of, nasty drugs with them, and guns, and a terribly awful criminal way of acting. And so, Trump is now in the process of reversing all of that.
Yeah, well, I think the Trump administration will take quite an assertive position on the drugs cartels, whether it's the Sinaloan cartel or CGNG, the New Mexico cartel. How they're going to go about doing this, I'm not sure. I think they've had permission from the Mexican government to train up Mexican forces to combat the cartels, but it'll be interesting to see whether the US takes as assertive action as they did with, say, Colombia. That will be quite interesting.
Yeah, right. Well, they've also put troops on the border as well, which is more than we've done. And I know that our border is a bit more kind of, more difficult to police, I suppose, because it's so long and wide. Because on the other hand, however, we know where most of the illegal migrants are coming in. They're coming in on a sort of, what you might call about a 20-mile patch of land, mostly in southeast England.
Yeah, I mean, there are quite a few that come through the Channel Tunnel as well. It's
is that sort of on the increase again now then?
It's very difficult to know. It's based more on insider information of those in France and the UK who actually work on those issues. I mean, it still could be horrifically high, but because of its clandestine nature, it's very difficult to estimate.
Right.
Same with people overstaying their visas. But yeah, obviously the Channel migrant crisis is more visceral, more visible. But there is a solution to that. Detain and deport. Listen, reopen detention centres. We've got Haslar in Hampshire. We've got Hampsfield House in Oxfordshire. And completely rework the legal system, get rid of the Human Rights Act, rejig a few of the immigration laws, be in a position where, if somebody arrives here illegally, we can detain them, and then we can deport them within, say, 48 hours.
Well, somebody's going to have to do something, because we've got the Home Office's permanent secretary, Sir Matthew Rycroft, I think, who's on his way out, basically saying that hotels are going to continue to be used to house asylum seekers for probably the next 4 years minimum. And it may well be that the number of hotels has gone down a little bit, but they're still putting people in them at a huge cost to the taxpayer.
Yeah, my big fear on this is that Labour doesn't want to solve the crisis. They want a statistical victory.
Yeah.
So my fear is they're going to fast track a lot of these people through the asylum system, effectively grant them asylum. It's a de facto amnesty.
Yeah.
They may refuse a few applications, people from safe countries and so on, but then they'll shift the costs away from the asylum system, i.e. the hotels, but towards the welfare state and, local authority budgets. Labour wants to solve this hotel issue not by detaining and deporting, but by fast-tracking them through the system. But that's not what the British people want. They don't want these people here. They want them sent back to their country of origin.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And the sooner they understand that, the better. But it's taken a while. Mike, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Mike Jones, political commentator there on the state of play vis-a-vis immigration. The Americans know how to solve it. They know how to deal with it. The same way the Australians knew how to deal with it. You just have to say, no, you can't come in. And if you do come in illegally, you won't be able to stay. And you'll be sent back from whence you came. But in this country, today's, migrant story is that a bloke from Slovakia who managed to attack a woman with a shovel has not been deported on the grounds that he's been rehabilitated and now he's fine. He's not a violent criminal at all. He's never going to hit any other woman with a shovel. I mean, where do they get this stuff? 0344 499 1000. Sharon from Staffordshire says, these people that do not work and contribute are the ones that get everything, and the ones that work get zero, nil. She's right. Sharon, you're absolutely right. And people get fed up with it. People who work for a living, who pay their taxes, who do all the right things, who never break the law, are being sort of basically mistreated and maltreated by the government, who want to give everything to those who are not playing the game, who are probably working in the black economy, who are certainly swinging the lead, and in many cases could be working but choose not to because they make more money by being on benefits. Absolutely ridiculous. It's 7:33. Coming up, we'll talk to Cormac Smith, former Ukraine Foreign Minister advisor. We'll get his view on what Starmer's plan is for that particular part of the world. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:36. I'm Mike Graham. Once again, says Jan in Newcastle, Starmer shows his lack of judgment. Sending our troops in as peacekeepers before a peace deal is signed and sealed is an absolute rookie mistake. Who does he think he is? And why not ask people who have done this before? And here's the thing, Starmer, take some advice. Well, this is the wonder that you must have about Keir Starmer. I mean, I don't know who is advising him. Morgan McSweeney, the guy who sort of masterminded his campaign victory back in July, is hardly, anything other than just the kind of Labour left-wing socialist apparatchik. I don't think he's got any real evidence that he's got a claim to fame with regard to war zones, with regard to conflicts around the world. You know, he's an insider in the Labour Party who's very good at sidelining people who he thinks might be dangerous to the Prime Minister. But what he's not good at is strategic thinking and long-term planning, which this government is proving itself to be completely useless at. Really? I mean, Keir Starmer goes over to Paris yesterday with his plan in his little pocket and his bits of paper and his presentation, and he says that he's going to, put British troops on the ground. He's prepared to have them work as a peacekeeping force. Even the German Chancellor, who you would think would be an ally of Starmer's because they come literally cut from the same cloth, thinks that Starmer's ideas are premature and inappropriate. Those are his words, not mine. And he said he found himself being very irritated by what Starmer was trying to do. Let's talk to the former advisor to the Ukraine Foreign Minister, Cormac Smith, who knows a thing or two about what's going on in Ukraine. Cormac, very good morning to you.
Mike, good morning to you, sir.
So, Keir Starmer's gone a bit early here, hasn't he, at the very least, if you want to be kind to him?
Mike, if you don't mind, I am going to be a little bit kind to the Prime Minister. I don't think he's gone at all. What he has indicated is that Britain would be willing to provide peacekeeping and peacekeeping forces, and we are a long way off that. In truth, look, it's over 4 months since the day after Trump was elected, and I'll betray my own politics. There's not a lot I like about Donald Trump, but if there was one thing I agree, it's that Europe has not been playing its part to look after its own security. It was very, very clear to me that this pressure was going to come on Europe. Britain has, and I'm very proud of it as an Irishman, Britain has played a leading role in supporting Ukraine for the last 3 years. And I think it's essential as we go forward. The world changed last week, Mike. Europe is now going to be more responsible for its own security than ever before. I'm not sure that Keir Starmer will get the backstop from America that he has asked for, because all of the noise coming out of the Trump administration at the moment is that not only are they going to, withdraw from Europe, but they may well be putting Article 5 very much in question. They have made it very clear that they expect Europe to enforce any peace that does come about, but I think we're a long way off that. And I also, in terms of the fact Trump made it very clear that he expected the UK to play a leading role in this, so I think I think Keir Starmer's message may have been meant for Donald Trump at the same time. And one more thing, Olaf Scholz is probably not going to be around for more than another 2 or 3 days. There is a general election in Germany, I think on the 23rd. And the most likely candidate for future Chancellor is Friedrich Merz, who is likely to be a lot more aggressive and positive, both on supporting Ukraine and on European defence. So,
and the thing about European defence, though, Cormac, is that, whatever Donald Trump says and whatever JD Vance says, there's no doubt that the Europeans have been less than, forthcoming, providing their own sort of security blanket. And, they may have been helping out Ukraine, but one of the things that Vance suggested is that they've all been spending far too much money on making their governments bigger, making their state bigger, and not spending enough money on their own defence. And I think that's a fairly valid point, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, well, I'm not sure about the first part of what we have been spending money on, but certainly we have not been spending enough on defence. There's no question about that. And it puts our current commitment to reach 2.5 even into very sharp relief, because I think the minimum across Europe is going to be around 3%.
Yeah.
But Mike, could I give you one little soundbite before we go? 340 million Europeans, or sorry, 500 million Europeans are looking for 340 million Americans to protect them from 140 million Russians who haven't been able to defeat 30 million Ukrainians in over 3 years. There is something seriously wrong. Now, there's a lot that none of us understand yet about what the objectives of Donald Trump are, but it's very, very clear that Europe now needs to stand up and pay a lot more. And at the end of the day, that's going to affect you and me. It's going to affect all of us who are citizens and taxpayers across Europe. Because if we spend more on defence, initially there's going to be less to be spent elsewhere, I think.
Well, I mean, the trouble is we've all been too placatory, in my view, about our governments. You know, my view is that our government have got more money than they know what to do with. The only way they get that money is to take it from us. What they do with it is to waste it on an awful lot of different places that we don't think they should be spending it in. So my view is that we put pressure on our governments, whether it's in Germany, whether it's in France, whether it's in Spain, whether it's in Denmark or Norway, Finland, wherever you want to talk about, and you look at where the money's going and you look at how much the government has grown the state. Since my time as a sort of reasonably alert human being, the state has grown massively. The civil service is too big. They've got more people in the defence department working behind desks than they've got actually men and women in uniform. That's got to be wrong. These are the questions that I think we need to quite legitimately ask and ask for proper reasons why they can justify it. Rachel Reeves is talking about cutting every single department now in government by 11%. That tells you that they can do it because it's bloated and it's overfed and it's overwatered, and it's time that we actually as a country took it back for the people. Simple.
Mike, I would say the first duty of any government is the defence of the realm.
Yes.
And in light of that, I'm agreeing with you. We need to reassess our priorities, and clearly we need to spend the money that we have a lot more efficiently, I would suggest. Yeah. But, I'll stay out of the politics if you don't mind. But
you're very welcome to stay out of it.
I will focus on the fact defence of the realm. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And I said over a year ago that regardless of who won, and I said it on an interview on another station, regardless of who won the American election last year, that America was likely lost as the reliant security partner that we had known for decades.
Right.
And in that, my assessment has been accurate. Europe needs to stand on its own 2 feet.
Yeah.
That is not going to be cost-free, and it's not going to be pain-free.
I would disagree with you slightly there, because I think there's an awful lot of, positioning going on at the moment. I think Donald Trump's making a point, and I think the point he's making is a good one, and the fact that Europe has sat up and taken notice of it is also a good thing, because it's time that Europe could stand on its own 2 feet. But I don't think under any circumstances, if there were ever to be a problem with Russia, that America would not come and help Europe out. Of course they would. There's no question about that in my mind. They wouldn't allow Russia to somehow encroach upon any NATO country without some kind of response. But what we do need is a reset, for want of a better word, as to how the Europeans have allowed things to just deteriorate and drag along, and watch, let's face it. I mean, you and I have spoken about Ukraine for 3 years. There's a lot that this government could have done. There's a lot that the Americans could have done. Back in 2014, they could have done something. When the whole South Georgia thing was going on, South Ossetia and all of that. When Chechnya was going on. There's a lot that the world's governments could have done as regards to reacting to what Russia was doing, but they didn't do anything.
Look, Mike, I'm finding myself largely in agreement with you. I think Trump is playing hardball with us in Europe at the moment. I said again late last year that I believe there was a deal to be done. I believe in percentage terms, the cost of that deal would be 3% across the board.
Yeah.
But what we're buying is to keep America engaged. And any of my military friends I've been speaking to in recent days would agree with you that America is not going to simply cut Europe loose, but they are playing very, very hard ball with us at the moment. And I think we need to listen.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. Cormac, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Cormac Smith, former aide and advisor to the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry. They're talking sense about what it is that Europe is responsible for and what they should be responsible for. Let's face it, we should not be relying on America for our defensive power. We should have our own. But the trouble is, successive governments have allowed our defensive budget to be completely and utterly stripped bare. And so as a result, we've got pretty useless armed forces. I don't mean the individuals who are in it, who are all doing a great job and will always do a great job, because the British Army and the British Armed Forces are thought to be amongst the best in the world. No question about that. But the bottom line is that we have neglected the defence of the realm. No question about that. One from Sharon in Staffordshire says, Starmer said he's ready and willing to put our troops in Ukraine. How about you putting our troops on the UK streets to help with the war on UK streets, the knife war? This is where he needs to put the troops, not in bloody Ukraine. What the hell, for a waste of taxpayers' money and a war that they will never, ever win. Well, a lot of people would agree with you, Sharon. A lot of people would. And here's one from Nefertari. It says, great show, Mike. How can they say wages have grown by 3.4%? I'm on minimum wage and haven't had a pay rise in 4 years. Looking forward to my 6% pay rise in April to bring me up to the new minimum wage. Well, this is the thing. The only reason, as I said, that the minimum wage, or rather that the national wage has gone up, is because of all the freebies that have been given to the public sector. If you happen to be in the private sector, bad luck. Coming up, though, we're going to talk about trains, because Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander is going to launch a consultation on the remit and design of a new phrase, the Great British Railways. That's what they're going to be called. Make the railways great again. I mean, seriously? We've now got railways that don't run. We've got railways without drivers. We've trains without drivers. We've got trains without announcements. We've got trains without departure boards. We've got trains that just literally don't go anywhere. Who's going to fix it? We'll find out from Norman Baker, former Transport Minister. This is Talk.
We should be under no illusion that Russia has made a huge strategic blunder with its illegal invasion, unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, and that has led to colossal death and destruction. So we need to make sure that we stand firm with our friends and allies in Ukraine. It is for our continent's security, European security.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 10 minutes to 8. The sun is up. It's looking a bit hazy over the skyscrapers of London, but it's looking pretty good. So it's not going to be too bad of a day by the looks of things. Hopefully it's going to be good for you. It's half term, of course. A lot of kids around in London at the moment. If you've got somewhere to take your kids, make sure you keep them informed at all times. Make sure that you actually keep them listening and watching Talk TV, because it's the home of common sense. It's the one place you get the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Let's get a voice note from Sue.
Morning, Mike. It's Sue in Lee. That picture of Keir Starmer and Macron looks like they've just tied the knot.
It does, doesn't it? It's quite a weird picture. I'm not quite sure what Starmer's doing, not quite sure what Macron's doing. You know, the French, very Gallic, you know, love all that, kissing on both cheeks and all that. Listen, you know, better that they talk, I suppose, than they don't talk. But the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, doesn't seem to be too keen on Starmer's ideas about Ukraine. Let's talk about something a bit closer to home, though. Great British Railways is going to be the new phrase that we're all going to be talking about, GBR. It's a state-owned company. It's going to replace the country's fractured rail network. I'm not quite sure how it's all going to work, so let's find out from Norman Baker, former Transport Minister, ex-Lib Dem MP. Norman, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
I've just the question has been posed to me: is Great British Railways going to be apportioned the same sort of office space as Great British Energy, which appears to not have an office and not have a website and not have any kind of means of propulsion at all? Is this just a bit of window dressing? Are they getting rid of Network Rail? What are they doing?
Well, yes, they are getting rid of Network Rail, but the reality is that Great British Railways transition team has been in existence for several years now.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a general consensus across the political parties about the architecture that should apply to the railways. And it's been there for over 5 years, going back before COVID. So why we need a consultation now is beyond me, because I'm afraid, if I can be cynical, governments tend to launch consultations when you want to be seen to be doing something and they're actually doing nothing.
Exactly. That was my worry. I'm quite glad that you've kind of confirmed it for me. I mean, everybody knows that the railways are in a bit of sort of jeopardy, shall we say. You know, we're paying people an awful lot of money to work on them. The trains don't run very successfully. They're not very reliable. A lot of people that I know have more or less given up on travelling by rail unless they've got plenty of time to get somewhere. If you're actually on a promise, if you've got an appointment, if you've got an interview, if you've got an important job that you need to be in a place to do, you're basically going to drive.
Well, look, I mean, the thing is that the Department for Transport, Heidi Alexander knows about transport, to be fair to her. She spent a lot of time in Transport for London, so she's actually quite qualified in that sense. But the point is, there's no money. Yeah. The Treasury is giving them no money to do anything. Rail fares are going up again 4.6%, way above inflation, pricing people off the railways, which is not what we want to do for all sorts of reasons. And, you know, moving chairs around isn't going to change anything in terms of how the railways actually work. You know, whether you have the trains run by a train company or by Great British Railways, the fares are still going up, the ticketing's not being sorted out, the rolling stock's not changing, the timetable will be what it is, nothing much is going to change. This is a kind of trick of the light, really, the idea that it's all going to transform itself. It isn't.
Right. But you say there's no money, but there's an awful lot of money in the business of running trains, isn't there? Because the people that run the train companies seem to do rather well when it comes to dividend time and when it comes to, sort of passing around the hat. And they all make quite a lot of money. And the government does subsidise it quite a lot.
Well, of course it subsidises it, because I think you'll find that public transport in nearly every country is subsidised, because that's the way it works, because there seems to be a societal benefit.
Yeah, I don't mind public money subsidising it, but I do object, if you're doing that, to private individuals and private companies then raking off profits.
Well, let me tell you something, Mike, there's a lot of attention paid to train companies, train operating companies. Actually, they are quite tightly screwed down now by management agreements from the Department for Transport. But I'll tell you who isn't screwed down: the train Roscoe's, the rolling stock companies. There's 3 large rolling stock companies who own 87% of our trains in this country. Their profits have tripled in the last 3 years. They're now creaming off almost £500 million in public money, and their profit margins are 41.6%. That's where the money is going, and the government's not touching those.
Right. And they make that money how? By selling the rolling stock to the government?
No, they lease it all to the train operating companies.
Okay.
Basically, set their own price.
Yeah.
And of course, what they do is they keep the rolling stock short, so the prices go up. There's also no rolling stock strategy from the government. This is a criminal omission, which means there's no link between the electrification going on, for example, and the trains which exist.
Yeah.
So you've got electric trains. This is happening. Electric trains are being cut up and scrapped. The Heathrow Connect trains were cut up and scrapped, although they were less than 20 years old. Meanwhile, we've got 40-year-old diesel trains trundling around with no process of being replaced.
So, I mean, that all could be restructured, couldn't it? Because surely, I mean, I've always said this about the NHS, and surely it should work in the same way that the train companies should. I mean, if you're the sole, purchaser of their property, if you're the sole leaseholder of what they sell, then surely you should be dictating the price and going, well, we're not paying that. You make no money at all.
Well, I mean, the government's made a big thing about so-called nationalisation, when in actual fact, most of the railways have been nationalised for years. Network Rail was nationalised under the coalition government, as a matter of fact. And all the bits and pieces that go around it are nationalised. The train companies themselves, although they have their names still on the trains, are basically run by the Department for Transport, which determines the conditions, the timetables, basically everything else. The thing that's not nationalised and is creaming off money are the rolling stock companies, and the government's not touching those.
Right. And that would tell you that this overhaul is well overdue, but you've not got any great confidence, by the sounds of it, that anything's going to change anytime soon. I mean, they're talking about trying to revolutionise the way that complaints are reported. They're talking about getting a passenger app which will help people to retain their ticket price. If they can't get a train, they can use it somewhere else. I mean, it's all kind of tinkering around the edges, isn't it? Because
yes, exactly. It's just...
At the moment,
fluff and nonsense, to be honest, Mike. Fluff and nonsense around the edges. If you're going to sort out the railways, you need to sort out the rolling stock. You need to make sure there's a rolling stock strategy. You need to sort out the fares and the ticketing system, which is grotesquely out of date and inconsistent across the country. Start doing those things and you start making a difference.
Yeah, no, the ticketing system's insane. I mean, I went to Edinburgh recently, back end of last year, and I had to buy all sorts of different split tickets. You know, I had to go via different places. There was no information about how it could be done direct. As it turned out, I could have gone a different way, but nobody told me. You know, it's like, you know, it's like entering some kind of Chinese puzzle. And you have no clue as to whether or not you're actually ever going to get to your destination. If you are, what time that's going to be.
You should not need a university degree to get the best ticket on the railways.
No, you shouldn't. And even if you've got one, you still can't work it out. But listen, Norman, good to talk to you. Glad to see that you're a similarly cynical man as I am on this one. Former Transport Minister and ex-Lib Dem MP Norman Baker there telling us that this Great British Railways stuff is stuff and nonsense, basically. There's going to be a bill pushed through by Labour before the summer, supposedly. But, you know, if any of you travel by train, you'll know what I'm talking about, that it's not a pleasant experience. It's very rarely a pleasant experience. If it is a pleasant experience, it's unusual and you actually get surprised. Dan from Kent says this: no idea Keir strikes again. Peacekeeping in Afghanistan and Iraq is one thing, but peacekeeping when a nuclear superpower is on the other side of the fence is very much different. What a complete plonker. Alan in Merseyside says Starmer would prefer us pensioners to be put on the front line so he could see us off once and for all. Yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised. I don't know what Starmer's doing today, Tuesday, of course, probably preparing for Prime Minister's questions tomorrow. He is a man who is besieged at the moment. Rachel Reeves is under more pressure today because of more lies that have been told in her Who's Who entry. Coming up, we're going to talk to James Cartledge MP, who is a Shadow Defence Secretary. Also, Lord Jack McConnell, former First Minister of Scotland, is going to be with us as well. We'll get his view on how this Labour government's doing and why Labour's failings in Westminster are now affecting the success that used to be the case that was going to happen for Labour in Scotland. They've got an election coming up very, very shortly next year. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. See you after the news.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10, of course. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning from 6 a.m. If you weren't here at 6, don't worry. We'll recap what we did. We'll tell you what we've said, and we will even possibly replay some of the clips that we put out there as well. Keir Starmer very much in the firing line still. Basically, he's on the front page of the Daily Telegraph today, having gone to Paris yesterday to try and convince other European leaders that his plan was a good one for Ukraine, which included putting some British peacekeeping troops on the ground. Unfortunately for him, it has not been welcomed universally, certainly not by the Olaf Scholz, German Chancellor, who said yesterday that Keir Starmer's suggestions were completely premature, highly inappropriate, and in fact he found them quite irritating. I mean, you should try having him as your Prime Minister, mate. 03444991000. The big meeting, of course, going on today. Sergei Lavrov in Saudi Arabia, the Russian Foreign Minister, meeting up with Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State. They're going to have their first conversations about a peace deal. Lots of swords being sort of waved around. Lots of, threats being made. The Germans, as I say, not very keen on getting involved in Ukraine at this stage. But the Europeans saying that we need a seat at the table. As does Volodymyr Zelensky. So we'll talk about that with Jack McConnell coming up. Lord Jack McConnell, of course, former Labour First Minister of Scotland, a man that knows a thing or two about the Labour Party as well. He's written a piece about the state of Scottish politics and why ministers and politicians in general have to be brave and have to be bold and have to be fearless to sort out the problems that Scotland's got. But those are similar, very much so, to the problems that we've got here run by Labour in the UK. 03444991000 is the number. Let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. James from Blackburn. He's a complete and utter fraud, our Prime Minister. He's sold us down the river at every turn so far in his premiership, and it ain't going to get any better either. I mean, he stood there yesterday. He's doing a speech, for heaven's sake. He's got a scratty little piece of paper that he's reading off. He's actually reading off it as well. He can't even look up at the camera. And that picture with Macron, what is that about? That is weird, isn't it? He's probably going to have that framed. Oh no, sorry, he doesn't like portraits up. That's why he takes them down. He likes landscapes. Landscapes he likes in his office. He's a right little weasel. Keep up the good work, Mike.
James, as ever, thank you very much indeed. People are not happy. All I'm doing is augmenting their views, letting them be heard, because this is the one place you hear the common sense view. It is the home of common sense. It is, of course, the place you hear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Dan Hodges coming up a little bit later on as well from the Mail on Sunday. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. We've been talking as well about Gen Z, apparently so frightened of eating food that's gone past its sell-by date that they're chucking it out before it's hit the date. Dennis in Melton Mowbray says there's no such thing as a sell-by date. There's only a best before or use by. OK, Dennis. Dennis the pedant. Yeah, thanks very much for that. Anyway, let's talk to Jack McConnell, former First Minister of Scotland, Lord Jack McConnell now in the House of Lords. Jack, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I find myself about to give you a compliment, which you know I don't do very often, but it seems to me that you come from a time when politics was run by people who seemed to know what they were doing. And I know that there will be people that will say to me, well, we didn't really like Tony Blair, we don't like his legacy and all of that. But the last Labour government under Tony Blair, maybe not so much under Gordon Brown, seemed to me to be a lot more competent than the one we've got now.
Well, I think that the last Labour government definitely benefited from having a number of people, at least in the initial cabinet, who had been around politics and government for quite a long time and had a long time to prepare for government. And they also benefited, I think, from a particular moment in time when big ideas were the country was ready for big ideas, and around about the time, the end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st century, it seemed like a moment when the modernisation of the country could really be driven forward. Now, I think we're about to go into a time when that scale of thinking is required again. We have a serious threat on the eastern border of Europe. Our security has changed dramatically. I would argue for longer than just the last 3 years, but at last we're waking up to it. And I think also in our country, with everything from people, so many people now not going to work and contributing to the economy, so many social problems created by changes in recent times and attitudes and in technology, but so many opportunities in that technology as well. I think we need some big ideas, both in Scotland and elsewhere, to move our country forward.
No, I think so. And I think there's absolutely no doubt at all in my mind that the 14 years the Tories were in, there was an awful lot of drift in kind of all manner of different ways. They didn't fix, as Gordon Brown used to say, the roof while the sun was shining. They kind of allowed welfare to become a big problem, benefits to become a big problem. They wore down defensive spending, which is now being said to have to be ramped up again. They allowed a lot of things just to not happen, if you know what I mean.
Well, I think we've seen essentially what I call government by announcement over the last decade and actually longer in the UK and in Scotland. And rather than people sit down and think about what it is they want to achieve, where they want to get to, and then work out how to sell that message to the public, they start off by the message that they want to sell, and then everything else either follows or doesn't follow. Well, I've just travelled down to the Isle of Arran for a couple of days, my old homeland, and I travelled on a ferry that was, I think, 7 years out of date. 7 years beyond the original delivery date, and God knows how many multiples above the original budget. It's nice to have it, but it's an example of announcement after announcement after announcement, but no actual delivery of something that is a vital service for local people. And I think that's replicated in our politics across the country.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And you wrote a piece at the weekend about, politicians should be fearless going into the sort of arena for the Holyrood elections in May next year. Similarly, I was reading a piece about how Labour and their unpopularity in the south has kind of impacted on Anas Sarwar in Scotland, where he was thought to be maybe a possibility of being next First Minister of Scotland. Looks like that's not going to happen now.
Well, I can tell you one thing, it's always difficult to be a Labour First Minister or a leader of the Scottish Labour Party going into an election when you have a UK Labour government and they are making some difficult choices. So he faces a very difficult political environment. But I think also people in Scotland are a little bit fed up with what they've been fed over the last 17 years. Yeah. And the state of decline in our education service and our health service, the lack of oomph in our economy. And direction in our public sector finances, and I think that's a wide open opportunity, not just for the opposition but also for the SNP. All political parties in Scotland need to rise to the challenge here. We need some big ideas for this next Scottish government, and I hope that in the spring, when they're all laying out their manifestos, they're going to deal with an education system that's going down international league tables, a health service that's become significantly worse than the health service even in England, a level of drug deaths that's the highest in Europe, which needs a whole new initiative to deal with drug abuse and misuse in Scotland, and an economy and things like transport services that need proper long-term investment and concerted attention. And these, in the early days of devolution, we had massive land reforms that changed land ownership and access in our country. We totally reformed the whole framework of rights and, for example, things like child protection, social work and so on, that had been a problem in Scotland for too long. We modernised the teaching profession and a whole number of the criminal justice service. These were all big ideas for the time, and we need similar big ideas for these difficult times that we're all in now. But
looking back now, and I mean, you know, we were there at the same time. You know, I was in Scotland when you were First Minister, and, you know, looking
I remember it well.
Indeed, most of it was good. And you know, you look at Wales now, and Labour running Wales sort of badly, it would seem. You know, their health service also being run into the ground. They've had their kind of, you know, I suppose their flirtation with a dual government with Plaid Cymru. We got Northern Ireland, which looks more and more like it's moving and edging towards a United Ireland front, with Sinn Féin as the kind of leading light party there. Scotland not really performing as it should do. I mean, would it be fair to say that devolution hasn't worked, or that it wasn't properly carried out in some way?
Well, you think things would have been better run over recent years by the UK government?
I don't think so. But I just no, because I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, that's my point. Really, it's you know, it's easy to pick holes in the decisions that have been made by individual devolved governments and ministers over the last 25 years. And people will make mistakes as well as do things right on occasion. The key thing is that they're making those decisions and are accountable for them. And I think what's important about the devolved elections next year is that people don't just vote on their general feeling about politics in the UK or anywhere else, but they look at the candidates, they look at their programmes, they look at their records, and they vote at a country level in Scotland or in Wales or in Northern Ireland, and they choose people who are going to run their devolved nations well and properly. And I think that's always been a bit of a challenge. In recent years, the level of turnout in devolved elections has often, if not maybe always, been lower than the turnout in UK elections. Given the turnout in the UK election last year, one of the things that could happen next year is that more people might actually vote for the devolved governments and make their choice, and that will make things really interesting. So those are the big ideas, those are the vision, those with a track record of delivery will get support. And, you know, I hope that people are going to rise to that challenge, because we have devolution in this country now. We need to make it work, and we need to change both the devolved nations as well as the UK as a whole.
I mean, I guess the big idea in Scotland is Scottish independence. I mean, where do you think Scotland is on that? Are you one of those who thinks? I mean, I became quite good friends with Alex Salmond, you know, in the last year or two before he died, and he was of the opinion, I think wrongly, that Scotland was moving closer towards wanting independence. I don't think it's moved at all, has it?
Well, I think on that issue, Scotland's pretty much stuck, and it has been since the year of the referendum, now 11 years ago. But I also think that this has been one of the problems, and it's mainly been a problem on the nationalist side, but it's also been a problem on the unionist side as well, that we need to see beyond that argument. You know, yes, that's an important argument around principle and the future constitution of the country, but you can't get away from the day-to-day issues, and you can't measure your judgments on health or education or the economy or transport or crime and justice and for example the drug deaths simply by how they affect the percentage level of support for and against Scotland becoming independent. You have to measure these things against the impact they have on the population now and in the future, and I think that's Scotland has been diverted away from serious debate about the big challenges, social and economic challenges that faces our country for far too long. And next year's election, I think, with that constitutional debate perhaps a little bit to the side for the first time in a decade, there is a real opportunity to say, do we want this kind of soft, failing education system that we've developed over the past decade and a half, or do we want a knowledge-based curriculum that's going to drive up standards and achievement and give new, fresh, great opportunities to our young people? Do we want a health service that is over-bureaucratic, failing in its basic delivery of everyday services, and a public health that is struggling to cope with the challenges of the modern world? Or do we want a health service that's efficient and fit and uses new technology? Yes, perhaps has to pursue some controversial reforms, but gets them underway for the long-term good. And do we want, for example, in the drug deaths, you know, instead of trying to work out what we can do that might be different from elsewhere in the UK, let's sort out drug rehab, let's sort out catching those behind the hardest drugs, which are a real problem across Scotland today, and let's sort out, in the short term, the health of those who are caught in a spiral of addiction. These things are all possible, but they need a government that's focused on it, politicians with ideas and the bravery to see them through.
And if you had a few words of advice, a nickel's worth of free advice to Keir Starmer, what would you say to him? Because he's struggling right now.
Well, I think trust the British people by laying out the complexity of the challenges that we face. Let's take this issue of security, for example. Now, we face a complex international environment where not only do we have this very real and current threat from Russia, which following their invasion of Georgia in 2008, which didn't receive a proper response from the international community, following their first invasion of Ukraine in 2014, again, no real response from the international community. We're now in this situation where we have to fight back against the idea that a larger state can invade its neighbour and try and take it over and extinguish it for the future. And that is a very real threat. But we also need to realise that we have threats in disinformation. We see the use of drones in this conflict, which could be a problem far beyond the Russia-Ukraine border and could be used by terrorists and criminals, as well as by states when they are invading, as the Russians have done. We see massive challenges as the Americans are identifying, and we have identified in the Indo-Pacific with Chinese harassment of the Philippines and threats to Taiwan. Now, all of these problems need a comprehensive response, and that needs a stronger military force, but it needs smarter security as well. It needs investment, but it needs the people. We need to be alert, and our country needs to be ready for the challenge. And in that area, as in so many others, I think the public are ready for an education about the scale of the challenges that's faced, and then a laying out of a comprehensive strategy over a long period of time to put our country in a better place. It's not short-term fixes, it's not easy answers, and it's not necessarily always good headlines. But my advice to the Prime Minister and others would be that lay out the truth and then set out a way forward. And people, I think, will be prepared to back you.
Yeah. Well, it sounds simple when you put it like that. I'll pass that on to him. Thanks very much indeed. Lord Jack McConnell, good to see you. Thanks a lot. Talking a lot of common sense there. This is the home of common sense. Jack McConnell, we want him on here because he does talk common sense. You might not agree with everything he says, but, you know, he came from a time in politics, whether you liked it or not, when Tony Blair was in charge of this country. There was at least some form of decency and the competence about the way they ran the government. This government now is not doing any of that. Absolutely none of it, right? Tell the public the truth. That's a great piece of advice. Keir Starmer would do well to take that on board and start with that. Just start with telling us the truth. Stop withholding it. Stop trying to keep things private. Stop trying to keep things secret. Stop trying to give away information that you don't want to give away. And stop treating the public like idiots. That would be a big step in the right direction. It's 20 past 8. Fancy winning some money? It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is Morning Glory. It's 21 minutes past 8. Here's one from Margaret. One from Steve. Judges appointed mainly by their mates in the judicial establishment are proving that they are incapable of sane and logical application of the law and are making their own laws up. Absolutely right. Unbelievably, Mark in Lancashire says, morning, Mike. Speaking of cakes being made of leftover bits, I used to work installing biscuit machinery around the country, and that's exactly what ginger nut biscuits are made of. They're dough offcuts from everything else, the different tastes disguised by the ginger. Yeah, that'll put a lot of people off eating those anymore. Gen Z apparently don't like eating food that might be going off, so they basically throw it away before it's gone off. Why'd you buy it then? What's wrong with them? This is Morning Glory. Coming up next, Ross Clark, columnist at The Sun, is going to tell us what he's writing about today.
If you are concerned about the illegal migration issue, you shouldn't be using delivery, you shouldn't be using car washes, you should order your vape shops from Tesco, your vapes from Tesco and not go to those vape shops. You shouldn't be going to those businesses that you think probably have improper employment practices. But we also need the state to be doing some more as well. We need them to be starting to levy really hefty fines because, frankly, we've got over 1 million people in this country here illegally, and if we want to start removing a large number of them, we're going to need the funds to do so.
This is Talk. Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 25 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham. Tim in Southampton says, Mike, devolution has failed. Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland have all performed worse on every level when compared to England. So, yes, they would have been better governed from Westminster. Well, I guess you could make that assumption, but would they have been happier? Because I know from working in both Wales and Scotland during those periods of devolution at the beginning, people were very happy to suddenly be in charge of their own destiny. Taunton Tim says, Mike, a mate of mine used to work in a bakery. One baker used to take snuff. He sneezed one day and the snuff went into the dough. He just mixed it in. Yeah. I can see that sort of thing would happen all the time. And Phil in Coventry says, Mike, we did the old sniff test last night on chicken, dated the 15th of February. It passed the sniff test. The curry was delicious. It's ingrained. Back in the day, we couldn't afford to throw stuff away. Well, that's it. I mean, nowadays you have more stuff than you need, so you probably find yourself throwing stuff away that you shouldn't. But, I mean, the idea that Gen Z are throwing stuff away because they don't actually think that they can eat it even before it's gone to its sell-by date is bonkers. But let's talk to Ross Clark, columnist at The Sun. He's got a piece in there today on page 12 talking about J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference. Vance is right. Europe is heading towards a dictatorship of liberals who are not liberal at all. Well, the new definition of liberal, Ross, a very good morning to you, is surely people who are so stuck in their ways that if you disagree with them, they want to lock you up.
Well, exactly. There's never been a greater misnomer in politics than people currently who go around calling themselves liberals. J.D. Vance, US Vice President, made a very effective, very devastating speech on Friday with a very simple message. It said, if you're going to defend Europe, and this was a security conference, of course. That's why he was in Germany. If you're going to defend Europe, you've got to be confident and sure of what it is you are defending. You're going to ask your people to defend freedom and democracy. I mean, you've got to you've got to espouse freedom and democracy yourself. And Europe has been failing to do this. I mean, J.D. Vance particularly cited the case of the Romanian presidential elections, which were sort of annulled by a constitutional court on the basis that a few Russian bots had been operating TikTok accounts and might have influenced the results. Well, we know how Putin operates. We know how Russian bots try to weave their way into every aspect of life in the West. But it's hardly an excuse to cancel an election.
No.
But that was one example. He also cited the case of Adam Smith Connor, who was a man who was prosecuted for silently praying outside an abortion clinic in Bournemouth, thereby infringing a public spaces order, which prevented people making any kind of comment on abortion within 100 meters of an abortion clinic. And to people like Vance, this is absolutely incredible. He simply cannot understand, and nor can I, by the way, why it should be illegal to bow your head in silent prayer on the street.
Yes, but people who justify it say exactly those words. But he was standing there with his head bowed. You could see what he was doing, and you're kind of going, right, and in what world is that somehow illegal?
Yeah, and where are the great defenders of the right to protest on the left when it comes to abortion, anti-abortion campaigners? We have these sort of climate campaigners who sort of lie down in the street, obstruct and spray paint over buildings, cause criminal damage and so on. They get prosecuted for that. They're never prosecuted for protesting because they have the right to protest. Of course they do. But, the left will sort of rise up in horror when the climate protesters are prosecuted for causing criminal damage. But yet when it came to anti-abortion campaigners, they were more than happy to, virtually every Labour MP voted for this new nationwide law where, you banning people praying outside abortion clinics nationally now.
Yeah.
And, it's a very, very disturbing sort of trend in the sort of trying to shut people down. The left seem to operate now on this basis where don't try to argue against somebody because, that's a bit too much trouble.
Yes.
Instead, you try and close them down, delegitimise them and so on.
Yeah, that seems to be the way forward. Let's have a look at something that happened as well after the J.D. Vance speech in Munich. This is Christoph Husken, who's the chair of the Munich Security Conference, making his farewell address at the weekend.
After the speech of Vice President Vance on Friday, we have to fear that our common value base is not that common anymore. I'm very grateful to all those European politicians that spoke out and reaffirmed the values and principles that they are defending. No one did this better than President Zelensky. Let me conclude, and this becomes difficult.
I mean, if that doesn't illustrate the problem that Europe has got, I don't know what does. Not only does he burst into tears at the thought that J.D. Vance has told him a few home truths that he didn't agree with, but he then got massive rounds of applause for bursting into tears. He then walks off stage left and gets hugged by somebody.
Europe
ridiculous.
has this fundamental difference in attitude to democracy to the US, and it shows up in the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which was very heavily influenced by Americans. The committee that drafted it was chaired by Eleanor Roosevelt, FDR Roosevelt's widow. And it has a very simple and wonderful little phrase in it. It says, the basis of government shall be the will of the people. And 2 years after that was written, in 1950, the Europeans decided they've got to have their own human rights charter. And you look at the passages on democracy in that, and there is absolutely nothing, no equivalent phrase which says democracy shall be the will of the people. Instead, Europe has this sort of rather subtly different definition of democracy, which it considers to be these sort of rights which are enshrined permanently in among the population and are enforced by unelected lawyers and so on, and unelected courts, the European Court of Human Rights and so on. And when it comes to, of course, when people, the people actually want something different than what is enshrined in, the European Convention on Human Rights, that's when the trouble arises, because, this document, the European Convention, has grown and grown and grown over the years, and it's now sort of, been stuffed with all kinds of things on diversity, the right to work and workers' rights and so on. And, it's become a very highly political document, which is, enforced by courts, and the law is made up that, the courts are basically making up the law as they go along. Yeah. They are being the parliament, judge and jury when it comes to, administering public law, and this is what is causing a bit of a sort of rift between the American conservatives and, well, not just American conservatives, American liberals as well, and the and Europe, who seem to have this rather different way of doing things, of refusing to trust the people.
Right. Well, you might also argue that people have had enough of it, because in most of the countries in Europe now, there's very much of a shift to the right. It's about to happen in Germany. It's about to happen, well, it sort of already has happened in France. It's happened in Spain. It's happened in the Netherlands. It's happened in all sorts of countries, Poland, Hungary. We could talk about it forever. But Ross, we've got to run. Thank you very much indeed. Ross Clark, columnist at The Sun, page 12 today, leader page. Vance is right. Europe is heading towards a dictatorship of liberals who are not liberal at all. Absolutely right. Coming up next, let's talk to Dan Hodges, commentator at the Mail on Sunday.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning Glory, it's 8 to 36. I'm here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning. Philip says, morning chaps, the oldest thing I've ever eaten was a 10-year-old army ration pack. The Yorkie bar, blue wrapper, had turned pure white on the outside, but it was all perfectly edible. Yeah, we're talking about Gen Z and their propinquity, I should say, to not eat food that they think is about to go off. But they're not even waiting for the use-by date to come up. They're just chucking it out before they even get there. Ridiculous. And Mark says, Mike, prisons are not for criminals, they're for political dissidents, or the far right in Keith Starlin's Brave New World. We just had a very good conversation, interesting conversation with Lord Jack McConnell, the former First Minister of Scotland, of course. Dan Hodges is here. Very good morning to you, Dan. Good to see you. I asked Jack McConnell what advice he would give, because I painted him in rather a florid colour. I said, you know, you come from a generation of politicians who kind of knew what they were doing. You know, how would you help out Keir Starmer? And you know what he said? He said the first thing I'd say is just start telling the people the truth. Just start telling the public what is actually going on and what your plan is to sort it out. Which I thought was very basic, but actually very interesting, because that's one of the things that Starmer gets criticised for a lot. That he doesn't appear to want to share the truth with a lot of members of the public. He seems to be a guy that likes to conceal things.
I think that's madness, Mike. The idea of politicians telling the truth, that's never going to catch on.
Yeah, they're never going to go for it. But I mean, there is some truth to he could help himself out here by just basically being a bit more open, couldn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think he could do. I mean, I think that's one of the areas we've talked about before. Where, you know, Keir Starmer's political hypocrisy has certainly been on show since he got into government. Obviously, in opposition, it was all about, you know, openness, transparency, and
yeah, I mean, he kept bringing it up. He was the one that kept saying,
"Yeah, I mean,
going to be transparent."
that was a big part of his pitch. And obviously, in government, it's, you know, we've had the opposite of that. I mean, I've got to say, I mean, just for once. I mean, Keir Starmer actually has had a couple of things going right the last couple of days. I mean, we had some good figures yesterday on hospital appointments and waiting lists. We've got some figures.
But that was all smoke and mirrors. Nobody bought that. Did you see the reaction he got in the papers? I mean, hardly any at all.
Yes, I've seen the reaction, but I mean, it's at least they're focusing, in my view, on the right area. We've got some good economic figures today, finally, in terms of wages increasing above inflation.
Isn't that just all public sector driven, though?
Well, I mean, it may well be, but I mean, we're not. You know, I'm not going to sit here and diss nurses and teachers and police officers just for the hell of it. If their wages are going up, then that's good.
Well, no, it's great for them, but it's not great for everybody else who's basically getting laid off because the national insurance increase is coming in April.
No, absolutely, and that's something coming down the tracks. But I mean, if there's good, you know, as I said, working people's wages going up is a positive, and let's give, you know, credit where credit's due. Also, I mean, I think, you know, Starmer is now starting to sort of take a lead on Ukraine. I think he is now starting to sort of shine the spotlight on some of his political opponents who, frankly, are, you know, doing a pretty good Neville Chamberlain impression and are becoming the new appeasers. So I think...
except his interjection was described by Olaf Scholz as completely premature and highly inappropriate.
Yeah, but that, I mean, well, you would expect that. I mean, obviously, because, you know, basically Trump and has basically, you know, and Vance have basically pulled the rug out from Europe by saying in terms of, look, you guys are on your own, screw you, and we're going to sell out Ukraine and do our own cosy back deal with Putin. So it's not surprising that, European leaders are struggling to come to terms with that. But as I said, on this one, Keir Starmer's taken a lead. So, you know, finally, I mean, whether or not this will last, but finally, he's finally got on the front foot on a couple of areas.
Well, all I can say is that the reaction that I've had from people saying, what the hell is he going to send our troops into? Why is he committing troops already without even knowing exactly what's going on? And what sort of numbers of troops do we even have? We're not even sure we got 25,000 that we could send.
Yeah, but he frankly, I'm glad he is doing that because, as I said, Trump and and Vance and Hesketh, when he were over here, were very, very clear. They said, sorry, Europe, Britain, you're on your own. You know, you've relied on us. You're not going to rely on us anymore.
Yeah, they didn't really say that, though. I mean, Europe's...
That's exactly what they said. No, that's exactly what they said.
Well, yeah, but, you know, you're a man that understands nuance in politics, Dan. Do you really think that if Russia invaded Poland tomorrow, the Americans wouldn't help out? Of course they would. The point is that, you know, this is more positioning by the Trump administration, who are quite right, by the way, to say that Europe has allowed its defences to suffer at the hands of all sorts of other things, including massive budgets being spent on migration, putting up people in hotels, spending on welfare, not spending enough money on defence, and all of that. They're making a point. They're not saying that they're abandoning Europe. You know, the sort of the pearl clutching, as you sometimes describe it, from these people is unbelievable.
No, I think people are taking Trump, and this is what we're always told. We're always told, you know, Trump is a plain speaker. You know, Trump.
No, he's a negotiator.
It was Trump, but this is the point. I mean, you know, to answer your question, you said, you know, would Americans be there if Putin marched into Poland? I hope they would be.
Of course they would be.
All we can do is work on the basis of what they're doing and what they're saying. And what's quite clear is Putin has marched into Ukraine, and Trump is currently in the process of betraying Ukraine, and he's been completely open about it.
Barack Obama betrayed them when he marched it in 2014.
I'm sorry?
Didn't Barack Obama betray them when he marched it in 2014? They didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, he did, absolutely. And now Trump's following suit. But the point.
Well, no, Trump wasn't in power 3 years ago. That was Joe Biden that betrayed them.
But the point is, the Americans gave security. The Americans gave security guarantees to the Ukrainians, said we'll be with you in this fight. We gave them security guarantees, and Trump has now turned around and said, we're pulling those guarantees. I want to stitch together a cosy deal with.
Well, Trump maintains that if he had been in charge, the war would not have got to this point, and he's probably right about that, because it wouldn't have.
Well,
but Biden is to blame for this, and nobody else, not Trump. Trump's trying to fix it.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, I don't, you know.
Well, Biden was the president, so I don't know.
Yeah, Biden was the president, and because Trump got thrown out by the American people, and one of the reasons he got thrown out by the American people is I think the American people thought he was getting a little bit cosy to Putin, and as we can see, he is getting cosy to Putin, which is why he's currently involved.
No, he wasn't thrown out by the people. More people voted for him in 2020 than did in 2016. But that's another story. We don't retread all of that. But I don't think anybody voted for Joe Biden because Trump was getting too cosy to Putin. I mean, you know, that's a crazy thing to say. The bottom line is that Trump doesn't like war. He doesn't believe in war. When he was president in 2016 to 2020, there were no wars. So when Biden got in, suddenly there was one.
Well, I mean, you're saying Trump doesn't like war. I mean, good. I don't think anybody likes war.
No, but he genuinely believes that it's a danger to not only life and limb, but it's bad for democracy, it's bad for the economy, it's bad for business. That's his belief.
Well, I'm sure he does. But the reason why all these bad things are happening is because Vladimir Putin has marched into Ukraine.
Right.
And if we don't take a stand against Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, he's going to start marching into
but why are you not criticising Joe Biden for not taking a stand?
I'm sorry?
Well, why are you not criticising Joe Biden for not taking a stand when he marched into Ukraine? He marched into Ukraine when Biden was president.
Yeah, but Joe Biden did take a stand, and Joe Biden said very clearly, I'm going to stand with Ukraine, and we did stand with Ukraine.
Yeah, but it hasn't worked, has it?
That's why Putin's attempt to invade and completely occupy Ukraine failed, because we stood with them. And Donald Trump has been very clear. He said, I'm not going to stand with Ukraine anymore. I want to do a cosy deal with my mate Vladimir.
That's not what he said either.
Behind the back of the Ukrainians and behind the back of the Europeans.
No, that's not what he said. If you really think that that's what's going to happen, I mean, I will make a large bet with you, which you can make. You can pay me later on in the rest of the year. You know, this is all about negotiation. The idea that everyone in Europe is suddenly kind of throwing their shirts off and saying this is absolutely outrageous. You know, Zelensky's not at the table, the Europeans are not at the table, Britain's not at the table. You know, that will all happen. It will all happen, trust me, in the fullness of time. Trump happens to be doing it this way in Saudi Arabia because this is where he wants to start. That doesn't mean this is where he wants it to end.
But the way he started is to say, firstly, to Europe, you guys are on your own. That's the first thing. The second way he started was to say, the second way he started was to get his representatives to say, no, Ukraine can't join NATO. The third way he started was to say, I'm going to have cosy negotiations with Putin in which Ukraine are excluded and which the rest of Europe are excluded. Now, you're saying he's a great negotiator.
He is.
He started these negotiations by saying to Putin, look, I'm basically going to give you what you want. Now let's sit down and negotiate.
Yeah, but he's not going to, though, is he?
Negotiation.
But that's not the way it's going to play out. You know that. And I mean, frankly, David Lammy came out and said that Ukraine should be allowed to join NATO. But you don't castigate him for saying that, do you?
Castigate David Lammy for what?
For saying that Ukraine should be able to join, should be on a road trip to join NATO. So he's already...
Ukraine should be on a road trip to join NATO.
Why?
That's absolutely right.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Because we need to protect Ukraine.
Well, what makes you think that you know more about negotiating than Donald Trump does?
Well, I'm just telling you what Donald Trump is doing.
Well, I'm just telling you what David Lammy's doing.
This is the interesting thing. Donald Trump has been very clear. Donald Trump, everyone says Donald Trump's a plain speaker until Donald Trump says something which they find a bit awkward, at which suddenly it becomes, it's all part of the deal. I'm just telling you what Donald Trump is saying and doing.
I'm not the one that's saying it's awkward. You're the one that's saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong because you don't know where the end is.
Well, do you think? Well, I'm pretty sure I know where the end is.
And where do you think the end is?
Because Donald Trump has told us what he wants the end to be.
So all right. So shoot forward 6 months. You tell me what the end is then, and then we'll play it back to you.
The end at the moment,
and I guarantee you'll be wrong.
The end at the moment is
the end at the moment. No, the end at the end, not the end at the moment.
Okay, at the end, Trump is currently trying to maneuver Ukraine into a situation where they concede to Russian aggression. He wants Ukraine to concede to Russian territorial invasion of their sovereign territory. He doesn't want Ukraine to be part of NATO. He doesn't want them to be part of our security guarantees.
You don't know
and
that
I think
either.
That's where it'll end up. Okay. Unless we say to Trump, we're not having that.
But if we being what, Europe, or we being Britain, or we being NATO?
Britain and Europe and the rest of NATO.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you might have a point. You might not have a point. The point is you don't know. And when we do play,
I don't know, but I know what Trump's doing now. I know Donald Trump's representatives are currently today sitting down in Saudi Arabia to have a chat with his pal Putin, without Ukraine being at the table and without his NATO partners being at the table.
So let me ask you another question then. Do you think that this shouldn't be happening? There shouldn't be a peace meeting at all? Do you think the war should just go on?
No, they should.
We should just do what Keir Starmer said, which is to give £3 billion every single year to the Ukrainians, who at the very least are quite a corrupt country.
Okay. Two questions. Firstly, no, it shouldn't be happening. The United States should not be negotiating behind Ukraine's back and behind the back of its European partners. And secondly, if we have to pay significant amounts of money to ensure that Putin's invasion of Ukraine is repulsed, we're going to have to pay it.
Why?
Why are we going to have to stop Putin roaming around Europe invading?
Why are we going to have to pay money to Ukraine? We don't know where any of it goes. We don't know what they spend it on. We've already spent billions and billions of pounds to no effect, right? It's a stalemate. It needs to end. Somebody needs to pull the plug on it. It's as simple as that.
It needs to end with Vladimir Putin's defeat, because if it doesn't end with Vladimir Putin's
defeat... Well, so then you want to declare war on Russia then? And that's the logical conclusion of your argument.
No, it's not. I don't say I want to declare war on Russia. I want Russia's invasion.
Ukraine cannot defeat Russia. That has been plainly illustrated by what's happened in the last 3 years. At the very best they can do is hold them in position. But what they can't do is defeat them, right? Because they haven't been able to.
They can hold them in position, and as we've seen before...
So that's a zero-sum game. There's nothing going on then.
No, firstly, we've seen before that if they have the right support and the right munitions,
they can stand still.
Back.
No, they can stand still.
So what? Okay, well, let me reverse the question. So what you're saying is, Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, invaded a sovereign nation.
Yeah.
We said we would stand by Ukraine.
Yeah.
You're now saying because Donald Trump has said it.
No.
Right.
I'm just saying.
Nobody was saying this.
No, Dan. Listen, I've been saying this.
Ago.
Dan, you know me, right? I've been saying this for a long time, long before anything had to do with Donald Trump's second presidency, right? I've been saying that we've been bankrolling this for far too long, and we should stop. I've been saying that.
but you might have done. But the sort of the mainstream politicians who are suddenly jumping on the bandwagon, we're not saying that. And suddenly Donald Trump said
That's because they haven't got my level
of
foresight and intelligence. That's not my problem. The bottom line is that there's an awful lot of people in this country who have seen an awful lot of money going south. We keep being told we haven't got any money. And when Keir Starmer turns up in Kiev and suddenly goes, here's another $3 billion, and don't worry, we'll just keep paying you. You know, people are fed up with that. We need to find a solution. And the solution can only be found, and as you know very well, in most wars and conflicts, solutions are found which are not always very nice. They're sometimes messy, they're sometimes compromised, and there is sometimes a deal that has to be done. And almost every conflict is settled that way.
So, and what happened when we took that view, as you said, in 2014, when Putin first invaded Ukraine, and we settled for a messy compromise?
Well, I've been very critical of the Cameron government for doing nothing, and of Barack Obama for doing nothing. But you can't suddenly go, now we can't do nothing as well.
But Mike, you know what you're saying. You're now criticising Barack Obama and
David Cameron. Yes.
It seems to me. I mean, it seems to me that if it's politicians like David Cameron, Barack Obama, if they don't do whatever they do is wrong, and whatever Donald Trump is right does is right.
No, what I'm saying is what they did do.
What do you think Donald Trump has done?
What they did do was wrong, and I think Donald Trump trying to end the conflict is right. That's all.
Okay. Since Donald Trump's become president, what's he done that's wrong? In your
nothing.
View? He's done nothing wrong.
No.
So literally, Donald Trump has done nothing.
No.
Wrong. Well, there we go. That's the point.
When he does something wrong,
you come on.
When he does something wrong,
Dan, talking.
When he does something wrong
about every other politician until we get to Donald Trump, and then suddenly Donald Trump is the world's only flawless politician.
No, if he does something wrong, I'll tell you what it is. You know, I'm very honest about that.
He's doing something wrong now. He's literally sitting in Saudi Arabia, trying to carve up Ukraine with Vladimir Putin. How can that not be wrong?
You don't know what he's doing in Saudi Arabia. So
I do know what he's doing. He's sitting in Saudi Arabia, negotiating with Putin,
trying to end the war.
And he's told Ukraine and his European allies they can't sit at the table.
He's trying to end the war, Dan. Surely, as a peaceful man, you would want that. But I'm being told we have to go. As informative and interesting as this is, thank you very much indeed. Dan Hodges, commentator of Mail on Sunday. Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe somebody else can help Dan out. Has Donald Trump done anything wrong so far? I don't think so. 8:53.
So we've got 75,000 troops. You commit us to the soil to keep peace, but the quid pro quo is you have to arm us properly, and that means you have to increase your spending of GDP so that we make sure that our troops are well looked after. And this big row is raging over how much percentage of GDP we then spend. So at the moment we're around we're aiming towards 2.3%. The question is, do we go to 2.5? Do we go to 3? Do we go to 5, which is what Danet wants?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glories, 5 minutes to 9. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Dan from Kent says, morning Mike, it's time for the Tories to stop this nonsense and get Farage as leader and the rest of Reform MPs as senior shadow ministers. We need proper opposition at Prime Minister's questions. All the Tory lefties can go to the Liberals. Well, that might well be the way to go. Let's talk to John Carlo, OBE, Secretary of the UK Children's Charity Coalition on Internet Safety. There's a terribly disturbing story in the Sun this morning in which it says that something like 38,000 paedophile picture crimes are committed in one single year now, and that's more than 100 child sex abuse image crimes recorded by police every single day. And most of that, I would imagine, is connected to the internet. John, a very good morning to you.
Morning.
Thanks very much for joining us. I mean, this is a terrible story, this one, isn't it? I mean, we've got other stories to do with you as well. We haven't got a lot of time. But the idea that this much paedophile activity is going on is dreadful, isn't it?
Well, I'm afraid it's absolutely awful, and it's been getting worse. Yeah. And there's no sign of it getting better, unfortunately, because modern technology is helping criminal paedophiles do this.
Right. And we talk an awful lot, don't we, about safeguarding children and safeguarding people from seeing violence on the internet, violent sort of acts which might, you know, inspire them in some way to commit those kinds of acts. We don't really hear much about the kind of horrible sex stuff that appears on the internet. What's going on with that?
Well, the main story that's been running today is about the way in which modern technology, and in particular encryption, is enabling paedophiles, guys who sexually abuse, rape and abuse children, to exchange images between themselves, publish them in different parts of the internet and get away with it. And the reason they can get away with it is at the moment there is no practical means by which we can insist that those images are looked at by the platforms that are helping distribute them.
Right.
That's what we've got to change.
Well, I remember watching Mark Zuckerberg, I think, talking in front of a committee, I think, in the United States about these exact types of images. And it said that when you went on Instagram, if you went to search for these kinds of images, it would give you a sort of warning on Instagram to say, you know, this may be an illegal image, or this may be, you know, a damaging and disturbing image or something like that. But then it would still let you go to the image.
Yeah, and I'm afraid he's reversed himself as well, because the truth is Zuckerberg's company used to do a lot to try and detect these images, and they're stopping doing it. Yeah. In other words, they used to be able to detect them, and Zuckerberg has decided to stop detecting them. That is completely shocking and scandalous, and it's something that the British government and the British Parliament really wants to reverse and stop.
And is it possible, though, technologically to do it? I mean, because one of the arguments is that, you know, the World Wide Web is indeed worldwide. Can you actually stop people from seeing this stuff?
Well, you could stop it within our own country, and that's what the Online Safety Act is designed to do. Now, but here's the thing. There is currently no technical way in which strong encryption can be broken. But that's a problem that we're going to have to solve, and it is solvable. When quantum computing comes along, it'll solve it in the twinkling of an eye, but we're not quite there yet. In the meantime, what we can insist is that companies like Facebook, like Meta and so on, where an image is coming into the system for the first time and it hasn't been encrypted yet, that they look at it and make sure it's not an illegal image of a child being raped. Yeah. That's possible to be done now.
Right. Well, then it has to be done, surely. John, good to talk to you. I'm sorry we're short of time on this particular occasion, but we'll get you back on. John Carr, OBE, on the dreadful nature of some of the stuff that's out there on the internet. Coming up in the next hour, we'll talk some more about Ukraine. James Cartledge is here. We'll be back after the news.
Spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time.
Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Palmer slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 9. And, of course, it is another beautiful day. It's Tuesday, the 18th of February. The sun is up. It's not too warm out there, but it's going to get very hot by the end of the week. I said this yesterday. I'm going to say it again. 16, 17 degrees on Friday, apparently. So you might want to open this old sunroof and get the shorts out. You never know. Front page of The Sun this morning. Part 2 of Harry Cole's investigation into taxpayers' money being completely and utterly thrown overboard. It's a ridiculous and stupid organisations around the world. Yesterday we found out from Harry £15 billion was being spent in all sorts of places like Congo, like Iraq, like Venezuela, El Salvador. Here today we've got Do the Wokey Cokey, £8 billion of research cash used for trans-friendly robots, queer animals and TikTok dancing. I mean, for heaven's sake, when is it going to end? This is an extraordinary story. Part 2, as I say, of the expose that came yesterday. We've got also, of course, lots and lots to say about Keir Starmer and his little trip to Paris yesterday. He ended up holding hands with Emmanuel Macron and vowing to send British troops in to do a peacekeeping role. We'll bring you up to date on all of that. The German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, who's not going to be there for much longer, decided, though, that was highly inappropriate and quite irritating. I understand exactly what you feel, mate. You should try having this bloke as your Prime Minister. Coming up in this hour as well, James Cartledge MP, Shadow Defence Secretary, is going to be talking to us. Chris Daw, barrister and KC, is here. We're going to talk to him about the prisons report, which has come out under David Gauke. Absolutely and utterly ridiculous. Let's get a voice note from Mark in Lancashire.
To be honest, I think all this defending British way of life is total nonsense. The British way of life is dead and gone. They actually destroyed it. And I definitely don't want to defend this British way of life. What I want to do is totally destroy this British way of life and reinstall the way of life that we had in the 1980s and 90s, when people used to go around saying, yeah, well, it's a free country, you can say what you want, it's a free country. Nobody says it's a free country anymore because it's not. I want to destroy it. I've had enough of it.
Mark, very strong words there. I can't say I disagree with you. We found out yesterday that there are hundreds, and in some people's view, thousands of people who have been locked up for thinking things and for saying things without committing any kind of crime whatsoever. Unbelievable stuff. I mean, we've got David Gauke, the useless Justice Secretary who served in one of the Conservative governments in the last 14 years, basically doing a report on prisons and saying it's tough on prisoners sending them to prison. That's what you shouldn't do. That's why the prison service doesn't work. It's because there's too many people being sent to prison, and it's a better idea not to send them to prison. For heaven's sake, he says people being tough on crime has caused a prisons crisis. Meanwhile, Angela Rayner has gone to Ethiopia for some unknown reason. Nobody really can explain why. We'll hopefully get to that. And Rachel Reeves has made yet another claim that turns out not to be true. This time it's in her Who's Who reference, in which she basically claims to have been a writer for a very successful economic publication, the Journal of Political Economy. It turns out that's not actually true. Again, Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, just can't get it right. And what about Gen Z? Apparently they now waste more food than any other generation because they throw it away before it reaches its sell-by date or its use-by date. Unbelievable. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Steve says this: it should be interesting when Trump grants an audience for Starmer and he demands the US back up all the spineless, incompetent European leaders in their valiant battle against Putin. I'm sure he'll get a polite response. And one from Robert, who wants to talk about Lord Hermer, or Lord Harmer, as I like to say. He says, good morning, Mike. Maybe we should call Lord Hermer Hermes, since he never delivers for the British people. What a bunch of wallies. Yeah, very good. Quite like that. Let's talk to James Cartledge, MP, Shadow Defence Secretary. He's down in Westminster for us, I think. James, very good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm in Suffolk, actually, but it's lovely to speak to you.
Very good. Well, I hope it's as pleasant up there as it is down here. The sun is shining. You know, the day is young, and it's half term, so a lot of people got their kids knocking around as well. Let's talk a bit about Keir Starmer and his trip to Paris yesterday. He's already sort of getting ahead of himself. Olaf Scholz says that his announcement about sending peacekeeping troops into Ukraine at some point from this country is premature and very, very inappropriate. What do you think of what he said?
Well, look, we as a party have been very strong in our support for Ukraine, both when we were in government, when we stood by them at the outset of that invasion. And if we hadn't done that, I think this could have ended, Russia could have conquered Ukraine fully right at the beginning. And that would have been terrible for us in the UK and for all of NATO. And in opposition, we've stood by the government because we think it's the right thing to do in backing Ukraine. Of course, on the specific question of, peacekeeping troops, etc., I do think that before considering that, you'd need to learn a lot more detail on really important questions like what would the terms of engagement be and so on. Yeah. So really, my priority at the moment, I say two things, two key points. Number one, Ukraine must have a voice in these negotiations. They sort of a principal voice. And number two, we do want to see the government getting on with increasing defence spending, and not just increasing it, getting on with it quickly, so that we can start ordering all of the equipment and munitions we need urgently, not least to replace the stuff we've given to Ukraine.
And is it not the case, though, that if you suddenly invited Ukraine and Russia into a room together, that it would last about 2 minutes, and that one of them would stand up and walk out, or one of them would have a flounce out, or something like that would happen? I just had a row with Dan Hodges, not particularly a row, but he said that he thought that Donald Trump was doing the wrong thing by launching these peace talks. Surely the fact that the peace talks are even happening is a good thing, and you kind of go with that and you move with the momentum of it, and you see. I don't believe for a minute that Ukraine will be locked out of any kind of settlement that's made, because that wouldn't be practical.
I think it's a good point. I don't think it would be sustainable if they were locked out. I don't think it would become material, quite frankly. As to your point, I think you're right. First of all, look, it's going to be a drawn-out process, isn't it? It's not just going to all suddenly happen overnight. We all want peace. Who wouldn't want peace? We all want this to end. But I do think, you have to remember in this, as much as this features in the media and we see pictures of world leaders, talking to each other, etc., we have to remember Ukraine is still being bombed every day, pretty much. It's nuclear power station bomb. Imagine being living in a family in Ukraine. You've been attacked relentlessly. You desperately want peace and security for your country. So you want to know that any peace deal is going to last and be meaningful, and that's a big deal. we can't possibly know what it's like to be in that position. We're very fortunate we haven't had attacks on this country since the Second World War, at least in terms of our homeland.
Yeah.
Not meaningfully, not in an existential way. And so it must be terrible to be in that position. So they will be craving that security. So Ukraine must have a voice, and we must have a meaningful negotiation. And to that extent, we do support the Prime Minister in, going to see the President, engaging with European partners, and we hope that we can build that process that involves Ukraine.
Right. And what do you make of the compromises that are going to have to be made in terms of government spending, if they are going to be made? Keir Starmer says he's going to go to 2.5% on defence, but he won't go any further. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have more or less suggested that all European countries should be more responsible for their own defence and they should spend more money. I mean, the Tories didn't quite get it to 2.5%, I think I'm right in saying. So where would you be on that number?
So two things to that. I mean, first of all, you're absolutely spot on, Mike, to talk about this issue and how you pay for it, because it's easy to forget that. People talk about percentage figures. Well, the money's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So in terms of the second point, in terms of what we would have done, as a very short history recap, defence spending fell every year pretty much since the Cold War started to end in 1985 when Gorbachev became president. Actually, it was 3% in 1996 when we were in government. It was then about 2.5% just before the big crash, and after that, the public finances in a terrible condition, and yes, defence spending did fall. So the first significant rise was under Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. It went up to 2.3%. It's been sustained at that level since by us in government. And then at the election, looking at the threats we faced, the need to replenish the weapons we've given to Ukraine, we set a programme to increase defence spending to 2.5%. And crucially, we would have funded it by reducing the civil service back to its pre-pandemic size. Now, John Healey has said to me repeatedly, the Secretary of State for Defence in the Chamber, that's a gimmick. He thinks that because, of course, for Labour, reducing the civil service is something they wouldn't contemplate. We feel, as a party, that we'd rather have more money for armed forces than a big civil service. That was a choice we were willing to make. So hopefully that gives an idea to the government if they are finally going to deliver higher defence spending.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel Reeves is in one of the Times today suggesting that they're going to cut back on government spending in every single department by around about 11%. I mean, I can't see that happening. Can you?
Well, I think the language they use is unprotected departments. So what they mean, I think, and obviously it's difficult to know really with Rachel Reeves exactly what she means, but I think what that means is, for example, health, education, and of course now defence presumably would increase in real terms or by whatever the amount extra is going to go to defence to get it up to 2.5% or whatever. And then other departments take a disproportionately higher hit. That's the only logical thing that can mean. And you've seen figures bandied around. But look, the crazy thing about this is this must have been obvious when they came to power.
Yeah.
We said we'd reduce the size of the civil service. This is dismissed. We said you've got to be tougher on welfare, which, we have to accept after the pandemic. For all kinds of reasons, people left the labour market and disability benefit went up. We had a plan to deal with that. And I'm not saying we got everything right, but it must have been obvious on coming to power they were going to have some serious thinking about the size of the civil service, the amount we spend on benefits, if we want to fund defence, which is the most important role of government. So I think finally they're waking up to that. I do think it's been a bit late, but let's hope they finally get on with it, Mike.
Well, that would be nice. But I mean, I seem to remember, and I'm sure you do as well, that just before the election, we had an awful lot of people from Labour talking about how nothing would be done that was not fully costed, about how ready they were for government, about how they knew that they were going to hit the ground running in every single department. The mantra was that, suddenly the grown-ups are going to be back in charge. Well, if these are the grown-ups, then God's sake, what their children are going to be like?
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, I always find the following statistic extraordinary, right? When they talk about, the inheritance they had and the things they had to do with, just remember this. If the deficit, which is, if you like, the country's overdraft, right? It's in-year debt at the end of each month. If the deficit, when Labour came to power in July last year, had been the same size as a percentage of GDP as it was in 2010 when we took over from them, it would have been bigger by a factor of £160 billion. That's basically the NHS England budget last year. So that puts into context how big a problem we had to deal with when they left that nice letter that there's no money left compared to what they've had to deal with. They actually had inflation back at 2% despite all the problems with energy prices following Putin's invasion. They had a growing economy. I'm not saying everything was suddenly rosy, because we had a very traumatic period to govern through with the pandemic and the war and everything. But I think, as you rightly say, Mike, they could have surely seen the writing on the wall that you can't just keep taxing. You do have to look at the fact that civil service is much bigger than it needs to be. Yeah. That when so many people have withdrawn from the labour market, I'm afraid you have to get tough with that and start getting. That's where the heavy lifting's got to be from the public finances. Not ever more taxes. We've got to get welfare under control. We've got to reduce the size of civil service and be more efficient. And yes, deal with wasted expenditure. And finally, Mike, it would help if instead of rushing through a deal to lease back a military base in Diego Garcia for, 18 billion, we spent that money on our armed forces.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the last time I had a Labour minister on, which was quite a long time ago, I suggested to them that the economy was in much better shape in June of last year than it is now, and they haven't been back on since. So,
well, and you're right. And look at farmers. I mean, crying out, I have an agricultural constituency here in sunny Suffolk, and it's very, very sunny, and I'm delighted to say that. I'm very passionate about farming because it isn't just about the food on the plate. They look after the countryside and the beautiful scenery we take for granted. They are being hit with a tax that is existential. This is not an exaggeration. The family farm tax could wipe them out. So, they're making some terrible decisions, Labour, and I hope on defence they finally get it right and wake up to the fact that we've got to prioritise defence of the realm, which is the number one responsibility of government.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. James, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. James Cartledge, MP and Shadow Defence Secretary up there in sunny Suffolk, as he calls it. Marcella wants to say something about Dan Hodges. For goodness sake, Dan, he's got no idea how negotiations work. You do not sit with both fighting parties from one. It would last about 5 minutes. You talk to Russians first to know what their position is, give them generally your terms and talk to them about the Ukrainians, and then you go back and forth until some mutual ground is reached. And that idiot second-rate human rights lawyer Starmer should ship up. Ship up or shut up? Probably shut up. That's probably what you mean. And Jeff says, morning, Mike. I do believe that if Trump is in some sort of negotiation about the war, then at least Ukrainians should be there. Otherwise, they'll be playing catch-up. Well, I think we all can say whatever we want. We can all have many different opinions on how this is all being structured by Donald Trump and the White House. But what you can say, I think, with some alacrity, is that what he's doing is trying to fix the problem, which is the war. He's trying to stop the war. He's trying to make sure that people don't kill each other anymore. And I think that has to be a pretty noble gesture and a pretty noble effort. And if he's doing it in a way which not everybody likes, well, that's fine too, as long as he gets to the end result. And that's what I would say. If he does something wrong during that thing, as Dan Hodges thinks I won't do, I will point that out. But so far as I know, Donald Trump has not put 1 foot wrong. Not at all. No way, Jose. Let's find out how you can win some money. It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is the Morning Glory. It's 18 minutes past 9. Coming up, we're going to speak with Chris Daw, KC, barrister, writer and broadcaster, about the prison report, which has just come out, a review written by David Gork, one of the worst justice secretaries we've ever seen. Lee says this: Dan Hodges having deranged Trump symptoms on Mike Graham's show was a joy to listen to. That's the beauty of Trump. People don't even know why they hate him. It's true. People accuse me of all sorts of things. I've never been accused of being a Trump fan. I happen to think Donald Trump is being a great president right now. I think he's doing a great job. And there are many people who are not Trump fans who would agree with me, I think you'll find. And if you don't agree with me, by all means, let me know why. 19 minutes past 9, this is Talk.
government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 21 minutes past 9. Ian says this: so for 3 years, Europe has been funding a war in Ukraine. As soon as Trump comes along and there's a whiff of peace, European leaders go berserk. Are they on the weapons manufacturer's payroll? And the argument that Russia will go away and regroup, well, so can Ukraine and their supporters. So either there's peace or it goes back to where we are now. What's there to lose? Well, I think so. I think the point about the peace deal is that nobody knows how it's going to end up, but surely the point about starting the journey is the point, and that's what I'm saying. Listen, I'd be perfectly happy to criticise Donald Trump if he does something that I think is wrong. He just hasn't done it yet. Alison in Richmond says, much as I admire many of the things Trump does, allowing plastic straws back and saying they don't damage the environment or wildlife is not good at all. He's very wrong on this. Alison, all I can say is, have you ever tried using a paper straw? They don't work. They're awful. You know, you put it into the drink, you take one sip, and it's useless. It's gone. Absolute rubbish. Anyway, I'm not going to have an argument about the environment because we've got more important things to do. Harry Cole, political editor of The Sun's coming up lately, very shortly, with the latest instalment on a load of money going south out of the government coffers, taxpayers' money, to fund all sorts of crazy stuff. Let's talk to Chris Dill first, though. KC barrister, writer and broadcaster. He's going to tell us what he makes of what David Gauke has said. He's the former Tory Justice Secretary, of course, who's leading a review on the state of our current prisons. And he's come out and basically said that responsibility for the prison service failing is down to politicians who want to be tough on crime. Chris, a very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
I don't know if he's right about this. I mean, David Gauke was never one of my favourite justice ministers, I have to say. I don't think he was much good at it. He's been given this sort of new operation to look over the prison service, which for me is clearly not fit for purpose. I mean, everybody knows that the prison service doesn't work. But is it really the fault of... it's the fault of politicians for not building more prisons, in my view. But what do you think?
Quite the opposite. We've been building prisons and increasing our prison population and increasing the number of people in prison ever since the early 1990s, when I first became a criminal lawyer. We've seen the prison population go up from around 40-something thousand to well over 80,000 at a time when the crime rates and the general demographics of crime in our society have actually been falling. And we've done all of that for the very reasons that David Gauke has identified, which are that successive governments, and it really began with the Blair government in the 90s and has carried on ever since, have always gone to the election promising to increase the length of prison sentences, and that's exactly what they've done. The problem, Mike, is that it hasn't achieved anything other than increasing criminality amongst that group of people who are sent to prison and increasing their long-term offending rates, whereas all the other alternatives have a much better success rate at achieving the number one priority for our criminal justice system, which I hope you agree with me, Mike, is to reduce the amount of crime in society.
Well, that would be nice.
Victims of crime in our society.
That would be nice. But the trouble is, Chris, is we keep hearing that crime is now lower than it was, and it doesn't feel like that. So there must be a reason for that. There must be a reason why people feel less safe, less secure, you know, less likely to be victims of crime. Because I think there's a problem with some of the ways that crime is now recorded. I think there's a problem with the way that statistics are put together, because there's no doubt in my mind, for example, that in London right now, where I've lived for a very long time and have lived in various different decades of it, you know, the crime in London right now has never been as bad as this.
Well, that's just not true, Mike. The crime figures...
It is true, actually.
It's not true. It's not true that crime in London is bigger than it's ever been. That's complete nonsense. I mean, when was the last time you were a victim of crime? When was the last time 99% of people were the victim of crime?
I was a victim of crime in October of last year.
And what was that?
I had my phone stolen.
Okay, and stolen from what location? Robbery or just a sneak theft? I mean,
it was snatched out of my hand on the Jamaica Road.
Okay, so that's
by the bloke on a moped, and 1,000 of those crimes happen every single week in London, right? That didn't happen 10 years ago.
that didn't happen 10 years ago because mobile phones were a different kind of phone. They're much more valuable now. They're much easier for people to sell on.
They were much more. When mobile phones first came out, you paid an awful lot more money you do for one now. You can now get one for 10 quid a month. People had to spend £2,000 in the days when they first came out, and if you nicked one,
if you look on the Apple website, you'll find that iPhones can cost well over £1,000.
Yeah, I know, but you can get a plan that gets you one for 10 quid. The fact is, they're not very difficult to get. Is my point. The point is, when mobile phones were first invented back in the 1980s, and you had to carry them around a suitcase, they were worth about £3,000.
That's true, but we can get stuck on mobile phones. But the truth of the matter is, the mobile phone companies, Apple and all the manufacturers, could stop that dead in its tracks by simply bricking each phone as soon as it was reported stolen to the police, so it was utterly useless and could never be used. Then we'd have no more mobile phone crime because it would be completely pointless. The government's already pointed this out to the manufacturers, but they don't want to do it for reasons, no doubt commercial or otherwise. It doesn't suit them to do it. But
we shouldn't have to get manufacturers. Manufacturers should not be changing what they sell in order to stop crime. What I'm saying to you is that street crime in London,
we have all sorts of technology.
But people will steal things because they're bad people, right? If you've got
they want to steal things because they're usually desperate for money to buy drugs or alcohol, or because they're part of a gang.
Absolute rubbish. Which desperate people are stealing Range Rovers and selling them to Russians and driving them all the way over to Russia? Are they desperate, or are they organised crime people?
Mike, some of them are organised crime. You're absolutely right. The ultimate end. But the individuals on the streets committing these crimes are often young people. They are people who are on the margins of society. They're often
criminals, Chris.
Oh, Mike, what's the point? What's the point? Okay, so I've got an idea, Mike. How about double the sentences for everyone again, like we've already done? Let's have 160 or 300,000 people in prison, and then see if that's a society you actually want to live in. Because
I want to live in a society like many other societies in many other countries where there are not dangers when you walk on the street that you're going to get stolen.
But where is that? Are you talking about Dubai? Are you talking about Dubai? Are you talking about the Middle East?
I've been to many countries where you can walk around quite safely and talk on your phone without it being stolen out your hand.
So have I. I've been to Norway. I've been to Finland. I've been to Sweden. I've been to countries which don't imprison many people. They hardly imprison anyone at all.
Sweden right now has got one of the worst gang problems that any country has ever had. You know why?
One of the lowest
because they've imported
crime rates in Europe.
They've not anymore. They haven't, because they've got an absolute epiphany going on right now with their criminal justice system.
I'm sorry, you're just dragging this all back to immigration again. No doubt you're going to say
it back to immigration.
Open the floodgates to immigration.
I'm not talking about
because of immigration.
You're the one that mentioned immigration. I'm talking about gangs in Sweden, some of which are homegrown gangs, actually. I don't know why you suddenly jumped on immigration. Many of them are homegrown gangs.
Because you're not thinking of homegrown Swedish gangs, Mike. Let's not. Your agenda here, every single day.
I don't have an agenda.
Donald Trump grabbed women by the vagina without their consent, and you
are talking about Donald Trump for?
World hero.
What's that got to do with prisons in Britain? What's wrong with you? Are you a bit deranged today, Chris?
No, you're deranged, Mike. You've just been bigging up Donald Trump for about 20 minutes when the guy is a international
psychopath. Why is that bothering you?
He's looking to take 2 million people out of their homes and put them in a foreign country.
Why does it bother you, Chris?
Why does it bother me? Because there are certain values that the United States, the United Kingdom and Europe fought for in the Second World War, stood up to Nazi Germany, stood up to Russia and the Soviet Union. And now Donald Trump is basically getting into bed with exactly the mindset and the philosophy that destroyed the continent.
You're not in favour of him stopping. You're not in favour of him stopping a war in Ukraine, then, are you?
Of course I'm in favour of it, but the idea that you do...
So you're in favour of something that he's done, then? What does that make you, a supporter of Donald Trump?
No, I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump, because you don't do a
just said you're in favour of something that he's
by
doing.
Telling everybody what it's going to be without negotiating with them, without even having a discussion. That's not a peace deal. That's an arrogant narcissist who spends his entire time trying to get news attention every single day, every single headline. He wants it to be about himself. He has no...
How do you know that?
Because it's so obvious to anyone. This is a self-confessed sex offender.
He's not a sex offender at all. That's absolutely untrue. I mean, you're a lawyer,
he said,
Chris.
When I'm famous, I can grab them by the you-know-what, and they don't even stop me.
You're a lawyer. All right. Is that evidence that you would be happy to represent and use in a courtroom, then?
Clear
confession. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't, because it's not evidence, is it?
Of course it's evidence. A confession is one of the most common forms of evidence.
And it's quite often inadmissible in court because it might be taken more seriously when you think it's serious.
Only when it's been extracted by force or oppression.
I don't understand. Chris,
not when he's laughing with his mate, telling them how he commits sexual assault.
Maybe he's just... Well, if you were his lawyer, you'd probably say he was just boasting. You'd get him off, wouldn't you?
If I was his lawyer, I would certainly try and defend him, but I tell you what, it'd be a tough job defending him on the sex.
No, but you would say that he was
he's
obviously...
already been found in
Why
court
are we even talking about this?
committed rape.
Why are we even talking about this, Chris? I think you need to go and have a lie down in a dark room. You're obviously very troubled by a man who has no effects on your life.
Conversation about criminal justice policy and the farcical over-incarceration in this country that's been going on for generations.
Well, I'll tell you what,
let's have more prisons.
Why can't we get back to that conversation and talk about why more people should be locked up so that the streets are safer for ordinary people to walk around?
Mike, you
sex
say
crime,
you
talk about... Hang on, you talk about sex offender. Hang on, you hang on a minute, Chris. No, you hang on. You hang on a minute, Chris, right? You hang on a minute. You talk about sex offenders, right? There are more sexual offences committed in this country which are unsolved thanks to the useless criminal justice system and the useless police system. Why don't you talk about them? Why don't you talk about the sex offenders that are raping women? Why don't you talk about the rape gangs that are raping young girls? Why don't you talk about that?
Let me talk about this. If you've been watching Channel 4 News a few weeks ago, you'd have heard me being
I've given up watching Channel 4 News. It's rubbish.
A young woman I was representing who had been the victim of rape gangs and child sexual abuse for years. I acted for her, I defended her, and I got her some sort of justice. And that's exactly what I do every day, Mike. I don't just talk the talk, I actually walk the walk on criminal justice.
Well, why do you think that all of those crimes went unpunished for such a long time?
I'll tell you, there's two reasons. One, massive under-resource in sexual offence investigation.
Rubbish. People ignored it. People ignored it.
No. Have you any idea how many one police officer has to deal with up to 100 individual allegations? It's impossible for a police officer to properly do that.
So there's not enough police then?
That they have.
Doesn't that tell you that we've got too many criminals?
It tells you that we have no idea how to deal with crime because our solution is always the same. Politicians will just say, give them longer sentences.
Well, let me put it to you this way. If somebody raped a member of my family, I'd want them locked up for a very long time so they couldn't rape anybody else. Do you have a different solution for that?
I don't have a different solution.
So we should be locking people up for longer then?
Mike, it's a very nuanced question because there are very different kinds of crime. It's very emotive and understandably
Tell me something I didn't know.
Sexual offences, child sexual offences. That is a catastrophic problem in all societies, but particularly in our society at the moment. We need grown-up solutions, put more resource into it, give victim advocates so that victims can have their own advocate in the process, which currently doesn't take place. I've been arguing for this reform for years, but it's a completely different argument to the one about our general addiction to the use of custody for everything and longer sentences. We've been doing it for 30 years. The reason people perceive things differently, Mike, frankly, from reality, is because people like you are telling them rubbish every day.
So they're all stupid and I've influenced everybody's thought process.
Misinformed.
They're not misinformed. I tell the truth, Chris, which is what you don't do. You know, you spent half the interview ranting on about a president of another country that has no bearing on the conversation that we're supposed to be having.
You've been adoring for the last 20 minutes.
I don't adore anybody. You've got me wrong completely, Chris.
Why don't you call it as it is, Mike? He's a self-confessed sex offender and a rapist.
No, you're going back onto it again. I mean, it's like catching fish in a barrel with you. Just get rid of Chris. He's obviously gone mad. Go and lie down. Go and see a psychiatrist, mate. I'll tell you what, you might need it. It might help you out. Maybe lock yourself in a room for a while and see whether or not that helps. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is for Trump derangement syndrome. Maybe a long holiday in Tennessee or somewhere like that. See what they do with prisoners in America. Let's get a voice note from Anna in Surrey.
Morning, Mike. Anna Surrey, talking about open detention centres, one in Hampshire. Well, I live on the Hampshire borders. We don't want them here, thank you. Put them where Keir Starmer lives. He wants them. Round them all up. Put them on buses. Send them to a field next to Keir. See how he likes it, having his area ruined. We had an attack on a young woman last week by a group of God knows from where they're from. All over the news. That's enough for us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Anna, very well said. Thank you very much indeed. People don't want open detention centres at all. What's the point of an open detention centre? It's not a detention centre if it's open, is it? Build more prisons, lock more people up, the world will be a safer place. The end. This is Morning Glory.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the Morning Glory. It's 36 minutes past 9. Oh, God, blimey, Chris Daw. You'd want him in your corner, wouldn't you? You start talking to a judge, you start suddenly ranting on about Donald Trump. Lady Anne says, maybe the problem is us, Mike. Misinformed far-right thugs. Unbelievable. And Denny says, I thought he was going to have a heart attack. I know. Julian Beverley says, that idiot you just had on makes it sound like stealing your phone isn't a crime because they don't cost much. A crime is a crime. Why on earth does he think crime is down? Glad you put him in his place. The country is full of idiots like him. Great show as always. Thank you very much indeed. Let's talk to our good friend, Mr. Harry Cole, political editor at The Sun, because not one day has gone by with that incredible revelation yesterday, £15 billion of our money being spent in places like the Congo and Iraq for all sorts of ridiculous reasons. We've now got part 2 in the paper today. A dancer shows off hip-hop moves as part of a university study into TikTok videos. The woke government spending has outraged taxpayers continues. Unbelievable stuff. Harry, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. You've had your Weetabix today, haven't you?
Well, listen, I mean, I don't know what's wrong with Chris Daw. I mean, I do know what's wrong with him. He's got Trump derangement syndrome, but, you know, I don't know how, I didn't realise he was going to be that easy to wind up, to be honest. But this is...
Yeah, bad case of the woke mind virus there.
It's absolutely right, yeah. Apparently, as soon as I mentioned gangs in Sweden, he suddenly thought I was attacking immigration. I mean, God knows why. Let's talk about this part 2. This is this organisation that you've discovered called the UKRI, UK Research and Innovation. I mean, there's more happy hunting for you with all of these ridiculous grants that have been given away. Where is all this money coming from?
It's coming from the taxpayer, Mike. Obviously, it's coming from... wages. Look, UKRI, they probably do. In fact, they do a lot of brilliant stuff. You know, we are a world leader in scientific research, innovation, and the like. However, as ever, it appears the grifters have got their little grubby paws all over this budget. And it took me not very long to go through it and start to find absolutely crackers spending. Yeah. A study at the University of Coventry on pandemic-style TikTok dancing and how has it changed how dancing is perceived in the world, and why does that need 200 grand worth of taxpayers' money to hold dance symposiums at the University of Coventry, where people stand around recreating TikTok videos.
Right, and get paid for it as well, apparently.
Absolutely whacked. I was gobsmacked. In fact, you know what, Mike? I was actually waiting to come on your show yesterday morning when I was just scrolling through all of this stuff. Yeah. Couldn't write it down quick enough. Because I just think people will be shocked, and actually ministers are shocked. The ministers who are responsible for doling out this cash went, hang on, that can't be right. Yeah. That can't be right. Then they went very quiet for a few hours, and then they came back and said, we're obviously reviewing every single penny we're spending. Yeah. It's where to begin. You know, dancing, £1 million for inclusivity projects at pretty much every university. You know, degrees in, not degrees, but sort of PhDs in queer animals. They're looking at whether animals are queer and what we can learn from the queer animals and how the queer animals are treated by the penguins. It's just off the charts.
It is incredible. And is this just, do you think, a result of people not paying attention, that somebody somewhere is signing these things off and presumably not passing it up so that the Minister of State sees it? Or, you know, is it all going on surreptitiously? I mean, how does it happen?
It's a very generous take on it, because someone should be there with an iron grip on this thing, just going, no, that's mental. Go away. We don't need this. Why would we pay for that? Go and get someone else to pay for it. And it's not just universities, it's firms as well. There's there's just grifters everywhere, Mike. And the second they get a whiff of a big taxpayer-funded slush fund, they just get their paws in it, they get their mitts in it, and they get their mates on it. Some of these people, you can click through your listeners can go and have a look at this website. You can click through and you can search it by person. And some of these people are doing it across multiple sort of facets. They've got various sort of research projects, all of them more mental than the last one.
Incredible, isn't it? And I mean, we've got Rachel Reeves this morning talking about cutting something like 11% from every government department. I mean, she could do worse than start off with all this rubbish.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're looking for fat to trim, you can start with the international aid budget, as we talked about yesterday, and we can start with the domestic research budget at home. And this is millions and millions of quid that could be going on, you know, troops, drones, tanks, planes, all the thing. What about basic air defences that we don't really have in this country? But all of this stuff, you know, our nuclear fleet is creaking. One of the great things we have as an independent power is our nuclear deterrent. And every time they've fired it for the last few years in testing, it's gone plop in the ocean. Yeah. Something in this country is going dangerously and badly wrong. And it's not just Labour, it's 14 years of Tories. I've been a journalist 15 years now. I've been writing about these government waste stories. And everyone comes in and says, oh, we're going to get every squeeze, every penny. We're going to find all this money down the back of the sofa from waste and efficiency, and we're going to, you know, divert it into frontline services. And it never happens. And the music has to stop at some point. And, you know, if it takes Elon Musk, yeah, he's a bit of a weirdo and he's a bit mad. It takes Donald Trump just to go, you know what? This is mental. This has to stop.
Yeah, absolutely right. John Healey, funnily enough, by coincidence, is currently speaking in Westminster on defence reform. He says we're in a new era of threat which demands a new era for defence. So, I mean, clearly they are now on some kind of a mission. Keir Starmer said 2.5% is the limit, but it may well be that that's not where it stops, right?
Well, I mean, look, 2.5 is dropping the ocean. Boris Johnson was saying 2.5 by 2028. 4 years ago. He obviously got fired about 3 days later after saying that, but he did say it, and he was right. And then it was 2030, and now, you know, Labour is saying, oh, we might get there by 2032 if we're lucky, but it's all subject to negotiation. And you know, listen to the top brass. Look at page 10, 11 of the Sun today. You know, our generals are saying 2.5 is the bare minimum we need to stand still now, just to keep the lights on in our armed forces. And now you've got the Prime Minister gallivanting around Europe, promising to put British troops on the ground, British boats in the Baltic, and British planes in the skies above Eastern Europe. And, you know, it's like, what country are you living in, mate? Like, what troops, what planes, what boats? And so he's got to put his money where his mouth is. It's all good being Mr. Bridge, the Atlantic man who's going to be Mr. America and Mr. Europe and take a leading role. Yeah, fine. Where's the money coming from? And what, you know, where are these troops? Where are these mythical boots on the ground?
Well, exactly right. And a lot of people who listen to Talk and who watch Talk and who watched our conversation yesterday and who listen every day, they're saying, hang on a minute, why doesn't he patrol our own borders? Why doesn't he patrol our own skies? Why doesn't he stop the migrant army that's coming in, who are now numbering about 3 times the number of people we've actually got in our regular army? You know, we'd like to have our money spent on our own defence rather than giving it to Ukraine.
Well, I mean, look, I'm of the view that Ukrainian security is European security and British security. You can drive to Kyiv in 3 days, you know, 2.5 days if you did it overnight. But look, you know, Putin is a menace. He needs to be kept in his box. He needs a bulwark against him. Ukraine are that bulwark. They are fighting the fight on our behalf currently. Yes, we're helping them a lot. But if we abandon Ukraine, who's next? Poland?
Yeah. But I don't think we are going to abandon them. I think the point is just bring the war to an end and put a leash on Vladimir Putin and bring him with enough troops to frighten the life out of him. But you know, we don't have them, so we're going to have to either get more. Right. We're either going to have to get more, or we're going to have to envisage the Europeans doing more as well. All of whom those countries have had the same kind of collapso as we've had over the years.
Well, look, the Germans' defences have been in a poor state for decades, and they've been too over reliant on Russian gas.
Yeah.
And they want to go back to that.
Exactly.
The French, you know, our defence, you know, relationship with France is basically, you know, apart from the Americans, there's no one we're closer to on the French, ironically, after smashing them for 500 years. But there are bits of Europe that get this. You know, the Poles get this. They are in Putin's backyard. They are spending 4% of GDP. There was a brilliant Estonian politician on a rival radio station and also broadcast from within our building.
Yes, they're not rivals, they're friends.
Friendly rivals. Yesterday he was saying, look, Estonians want money for welfare state. Estonians want pensioners to have, you know, winter payments. Estonians want their kids to have more spending on schools. but they have to say we are in the eye of Sauron, so to speak. We are in Putin's backyard. We have to make a choice. We have to spend money on things we wouldn't necessarily want to spend money on it. No one wants to spend money on guns and bombs and bullets, but you have to do it if you're going to be a credible sort of bulwark or a world policeman. As Keir Starmer is clearly trying to make himself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's time we got it sorted out. Absolutely right.
You've riled me right up, Mike. I was having a lovely morning. I was just having a cup of coffee. I'm a little bit late for work because I stayed here to talk to you, and now I'm furious.
Yeah, well, listen, this is how we want you, Harry. This is how we want you. We're looking forward to day 3. Hope there's going to be one. Harry Cole.
Next, we'll probably be building some sort of woke mind school on the moon or something. But God no, I mean, it's just I've been literally wanting to bang my head against the desk for about 48 hours now.
I know, it's brilliant. It's great stuff, Harry. Keep it up. Harry Cole, political editor at The Sun. Another splash in the paper today, page 1 and page 7. If you want to go and find it, it's got "Do the Wokey Cokey." £8 billion research cash used for trans-friendly robots, queer animals, and TikTok dancing. Absolutely unbelievable. Another bit of breaking news for you, by the way. Plans to restructure Thames Water have been set about. It was set to run out of money by the end of March. I mean, how on earth do you run a company that collects something that falls from the sky for free and you can't make any money out of selling it to people? They apparently need a loan, which has now been approved by a High Court judge, of £3 billion, a rescue loan to keep the company afloat, if you'll pardon the pun. And what on earth are they doing with all that money? Maybe they should stop paying the dividends quite so well, and maybe they should stop paying the directors quite so much, and maybe they should actually start looking after the consumers instead of charging them ridiculous amounts of money for the stuff, as I say, that falls free from the sky. This is Talk. I'm Mike Graham. Loads more coming up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 10 minutes to 10. Alex Phillips will be here shortly to take over, and all the way through till 1 o'clock, of course, and she's in for Julie Hartley-Brewitt all week. One from Stephen Tewkesbury says, "Morning, Mike. That lawyer you just had on is the absolute reason this country is in the state it's in. Lost his rag because he was losing the argument. absolute pillock. And Nick says if the phone companies brick the phones, the criminals will sell them for the precious metals inside, like gold. Nick in Woking. And Dave says barristers will never support tough sentencing. If you give soft, short, non-custodial sentences, criminals will not worry about getting them. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. John Healey, currently speaking in Westminster on defence reform, by the way, is pledging that investment in defence will be matched by reform. Presumably he means by that not by reform the party, but by reforming the way that defence budget is actually operational, and they'll spend more money on troops and in things that are needed on the ground, like weapons, rather than actually spending it on hiring loads and loads of civil servants. He says he's introducing clear points of accountability at every level, which tells you that they know that they're wasting a load of money, which of course they are. Let's have a listen to what Lord Jack McConnell said to me a little bit earlier when we spoke to him.
Now, we face a complex international environment where not only do we have this very real and current threat from Russia, which following their invasion of Georgia in 2008, which didn't receive a proper response from the international community, following their first invasion of Ukraine in 2014, again, no real response from the international community. That we're now in this situation where we have to fight back against the idea that a larger state can invade its neighbour and try and take it over and extinguish it for the future. And that is a very real threat. But we also need to realise that we have threats in disinformation. We see the use of drones in this conflict, which could be a problem far beyond the Russia-Ukraine border and could be used by terrorists and criminals, as well as by states when they are invading, as the Russians have done. We see massive challenges as the Americans are identifying, and we have identified in the Indo-Pacific with Chinese harassment of the Philippines and threats to Taiwan. Now, all of these problems need a comprehensive response, and that needs a stronger military force, but it needs smarter security as well. It needs investment, but it needs the people. We need to be alert, and our country needs to be ready for the challenge. And in that area, as in so many others, I think the public are ready for an education about the scale of the challenges that's faced, and then a laying out of a comprehensive strategy over a long period of time to put our country in a better place. It's not short-term fixes, it's not easy answers, and it's not necessarily always good headlines. But my advice to the Prime Minister and others would be that lay out the truth and then set out a way forward.
Jack McConnell there, former First Minister of Scotland, saying that, you know, rather unusually, wouldn't it be a good idea for Keir Starmer to actually start telling the public the truth? Because that's what he doesn't like to do. He likes to conceal it, I'm afraid. Let's talk to Daniel in Epsom. Daniel, very good morning, sir.
Good morning, Chief. How are you?
Not bad at all. Very fired up this morning. Quite up for it, I must say.
Another legendary show, sir. I give them both barrels. Keep it going. I just want to say that Starmer and the powers that be in this country, they seem to be obsessed with international security.
Yeah.
Russia and China. We must do this, and we must. And I think to myself, hang on a minute. You've got thousands of young men from the third world, unvetted, unchecked, coming into our country every day against our wishes.
Right.
That are causing, if we actually release the...
Roaming around completely unfettered, by the way.
Yeah, roaming around unfettered, living on our coin, getting PlayStations and food, even though no one asked us if we wanted to pay for that, because they know we'd all say no. You know, and they're putting our lives in danger. I mean, you know, if you look at the statistics in crime, I mean, that guy that was on earlier trying to convince you that our towns and cities have less crime than ever.
Yeah, what a load of rubbish.
I mean, I wouldn't let my kids go into London for the day. I know what's there.
No, my son went to Budapest, right, because he turned 18, went with his mate. His mother was like, oh, my God, he's going to a foreign country. I said he'd be a lot safer in Budapest than he would be in London.
Mate, yeah,
and sure he was.
Right. And do you know why that is, Mike?
There's a very good reason why that is.
The reason why that is because Eastern Europe are basically homogenous. If you look at, there's a direct correlation to a lot of the crimes that you subsequently live with and mass immigration. If you look at Slovenia, Slovakia, Poland, Hungary, basically they have really low levels of crime in their country, and and it's because they're homogenous. I mean, we can pretend it's not true and toe the line, but it is true.
Yeah,
and we all
I was
know
in Montenegro in the summer, right? And we had this guy who sort of introduced us to the place we were staying in, and I said to him, "Is it safe? You know, obviously we've got, we've got things. We have to put them in a safe." Blah blah blah. He said, "No, this country is very safe." He says, "All the criminals are the politicians."
Well, it's the same here. We've got them in Parliament and millions of them outside of Parliament as well, Chief.
True, absolutely right. Good to hear from you, Daniel. Thanks very much indeed. John Healey now saying that we must rearm. So he's really getting stuck into it now, because I think what you're going to find is that Keir Starmer, Mr. Flip-Flop, Captain Hindsight, he's going to find himself in a pretty bad place, right? Because he's going to be out there trying to present himself as Churchill, trying to present himself as some kind of, saviour of the Western world, and putting it all out there, putting it all in for the British troops going into Ukraine. But everyone's now going to tell him from the Department of Defence, actually, we haven't got any. So we've now got John Healey, who's the Defence Secretary of State for Defence, saying we need to rearm Britain. Well, quite right. We need to do an awful lot. We need to rearm the police. We need to rearm the army. We need to rearm the navy. We need more ships. We need more planes. We need more helicopters. We need more missiles. These politicians over years have told us that we won't ever need to worry about fighting another war because everybody is getting on with one another. Well, not anymore, I'm afraid. This from Ken in Lancashire. He says, the general public wants our government to be tough on crime and criminals. Prison doesn't work because it's too soft. It's a holiday for lifestyle criminals who enjoy the security of regular meals, a good bed, surrounded by friends, a good gym, television. Make prison really hard so criminals don't enjoy it. Don't reduce prison sentences just because we've run out of space. That's never going to stop crime. Well, that's completely right. We also know that one of the things that's happened is that recidivism rates have gone up, so that now people who do commit crime and then go to prison are more likely to come back into prison. Now, according to people like Chris Daw, that's because we should be giving them something better to do. But in my view, what it is about is the fact that prison is not hard enough so that they don't mind going back in. If prison was really horrible, they wouldn't want to ever go back. And that's what it should be like, surely. Morning, Mike, says Howard in Suffolk. This childish notion from the left that Trump cozying up with Putin is a stupid idea. To negotiate, you must first talk. And to talk, you must be civil. Soft words while carrying a big stick. The likes of Dan Hodges will never understand that. Yeah, I mean, that is also part of the problem. Easy to find more money for defence spending, says Paul. 1, cut the size of the civil service. Yes. 2, make benefits time limited. We have created welfare career professionals who know how to play the system. Absolutely. And number 3, reduce in-work benefits. Make work pay. Some people are choosing to stay on low-hour contracts as it will affect the benefits if they do more hours. Paul in Cheshire. Yeah, it's very true. I mean, we have got more answers on this show and on this station than almost any government has ever come up with on a daily basis. Alex Phillips is here. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Our listeners and viewers have all got great ideas as to how we fix things.
Yeah.
Why are our politicians so hopeless at doing it?
Well, do you know what? I was asking yesterday, I've got this perennial question with, are these people doing things deliberately or are they delusional?
Yeah.
And I think it's got to be a mixture of both, because when you looked at J.D. Vance making that speech at the Munich conference and saying, look, I think the bigger problem is you lot, and all the evidence is there. The day before, a terrorist attack again.
Right.
The open
and there was one a day
borders
after as well in Austria, wasn't it?
Right. The energy crisis, because they'd cozied up to Russia 6 months after Russia had invaded Ukraine. They were still hand-wringing over whether